The German Shepherd moved before anyone in the pawn shop understood what was happening. 1 second, Rocky was standing perfectly still beside a former military operator, trained to ignore distractions and obey commands without hesitation. The next second, he broke formation, crossed the room, and sat down beside a struggling nurse holding a small velvet pouch filled with old military medals. He refused to move. The owner called him back. Rocky ignored the command. The entire shop went silent. Because in 8 years, nobody had ever seen Rocky do that before. The woman looked exhausted. Her hospital scrubs were wrinkled from another overnight shift. Her rent was overdue. Her bank account was nearly empty. And the medals inside that pouch represented the last pieces of a life she had spent years trying to forget. She only needed enough money to survive one more week. What she didn't know was that Rocky recognized something nobody else could see. Something buried deep inside a military secret that powerful people had spent years trying to erase. Years earlier, Emma Bennett had been a decorated combat medic. Then one decision changed everything. She refused an order. 12 soldiers lived. Her career died. The military blamed her. Her records disappeared. Her reputation was destroyed. And for years, Emma tried to move on. She became a nurse. She worked double shifts. She stayed quiet. She stopped asking questions. Until the day a retired military K-9 looked into her eyes and refused to leave her side. What happened next would uncover hidden evidence, expose a network of corruption reaching into the highest levels of power, and force Emma to fight a battle she thought had ended long ago. But the most shocking part wasn't the conspiracy. It wasn't the threats. It wasn't even the people willing to risk everything to keep the truth buried. The most shocking part was that a dog named Rocky may have been the first one to realize that Emma Bennett was never the villain they claimed she was. And before this story is over, a forgotten nurse, a loyal K-9, and a secret military operation will collide in a way that changes all of their lives forever. A cold Montana wind moved through Cedar Ridge before sunrise, carrying the smell of wet pine, frozen asphalt, and distant snow from the mountains beyond town. Emma Bennett stood in the narrow kitchen of her studio apartment and stared at the coffee maker as if it had personally betrayed her. The little machine sat silent on the counter, its red light dead, its glass pot empty, its cheap plastic body somehow looking more exhausted than she felt. For most people, a broken coffee maker was an inconvenience. For Emma, it was the final stone dropped onto a roof that had already been sagging under years of rain. She was 34 years old, though the mirror often made her look older after a double shift. She was not a delicate woman, but she carried herself quietly, as if she had learned long ago that drawing attention could become dangerous. She stood a little over 5'7", with a lean frame built more from endurance than vanity. Her brown hair, usually tied in a practical knot at the back of her head, had streaks of copper that showed when sunlight caught it. Her skin was pale from too many hospital nights and too few mornings outdoors. Her eyes were gray-blue, steady and watchful, the eyes of someone who noticed exits, hands, pain, lies, and small changes in breathing before anyone else in the room did. On the counter beside the dead coffee maker sat 3 envelopes she had not opened because opening them would not change what was inside. One was from the electric company. One was from her landlord. One was from the state nursing board. And that one had been sitting there for 9 days like a black bird with folded wings. Emma knew what it said, or at least she knew enough. A complaint had been placed against her license months earlier. Anonymous, administrative, vague in all the ways that made it hard to fight and easy to fear. She had answered every request. She had sent every form. She had called every office that would take her call. Still, the shadow remained. Her rent was overdue by $486. Her checking account held $22.17. Her refrigerator had half a jar of peanut butter, 2 eggs, and a bottle of mustard she did not remember buying. She had worked 2 extra shifts that week at Mountain View Regional Hospital, but overtime did not help much when old debts had teeth and kept biting. Emma reached for the small velvet pouch beside the envelopes. The pouch was dark blue, frayed at the drawstring, soft from years of being opened and closed by hands that had once trembled after gunfire and later trembled from shame. Inside were the last pieces of a life she had spent years trying to bury. 2 campaign medals, 1 combat medical badge, a unit citation, and a small engraved medal with her name on the back. Staff Sergeant Emma Bennett. She had not said that name aloud in years. Not staff sergeant. Not combat medic. Not the woman who had disobeyed an order and saved 12 soldiers, only to be written out of the truth like an error in a report. She closed her fingers around the pouch and whispered, "Just enough for rent." Her voice sounded strange in the apartment. Too small. Too human. Cedar Ridge was waking slowly when Emma drove across town. It was a mountain city with a clean postcard face and a tired working-class heart. Tourists saw the old brick storefronts, the white church steeple, the pine-covered slopes rising like sleeping giants beyond Main Street. Emma saw the pawn shops, payday lenders, empty lots, and the hospital on the hill where nurses held the place together with coffee, stubbornness, and feet that never stopped aching. Kepler's Pawn and Exchange sat between a laundromat and a closed tax office with sun-faded signs taped to the windows. The pawn shop's neon sign buzzed faintly even in daylight. Emma parked in front and sat in her car for nearly 3 minutes with both hands on the steering wheel. There were things a person could survive without feeling them in the moment. Explosions. Screaming. Blood. The warm pressure of someone's hand slipping out of yours. But humiliation was different. Humiliation waited until everything was quiet. Then it walked into the room, pulled up a chair, and reminded you exactly how far you had fallen. Emma slipped the velvet pouch into her jacket pocket and got out. The bell above the pawn shop door gave a tired jingle when she entered. The place smelled of dust, old leather, gun oil, and stale coffee. Rows of guitars hung along one wall. Glass cases displayed watches, pocket knives, jewelry, coins, and rings that had probably once meant forever until forever needed grocery money. Behind the counter stood Marvin Kepler, a heavy-set man in his late 50s with thinning gray hair, a round face, and reading glasses perched low on his nose. Marvin had owned the shop for 20 years and had developed the careful neutrality of a man who knew people rarely came to him on their best days. He was not cruel, but he was practical. Practical men could sometimes look like saints or wolves depending on how hungry you were. "Morning," Marvin said without much interest. "Morning," Emma replied. Her voice stayed calm. She had learned a long time ago that calm was a tool. People trusted calm. People underestimated calm. Sometimes calm kept you alive. Near the back of the shop stood a tall man in a faded field jacket, examining a shelf of old military compasses. He looked late 30s or early 40s, broad across the shoulders, but lean in the way of men who had carried weight across bad terrain rather than lifted weights under clean gym lights. His dark blonde hair was clipped short, but not recently. A rough beard shadow covered his jaw, giving his face a hard-edged weariness. There was a thin scar running from the corner of his left eyebrow toward his temple, pale against weathered skin. He had the kind of posture that made a room arrange itself around him without anyone knowing why. Beside him stood a German shepherd. Emma noticed the dog first because some part of her still cataloged working dogs automatically. He was large, close to 90 pounds, with a deep black saddle across his back, 10 legs, and a silvering muzzle that suggested age without weakness. His ears were upright, sharp as folded blades. His eyes were dark amber, intelligent and solemn. He wore a plain black working harness, old but well cared for. One patch had been removed, leaving a rectangle of darker fabric where a unit name or agency label might once have been. The dog did not fidget. He did not sniff at the shelves. He did not beg for attention. He stood at the man's left side with disciplined stillness, every muscle ready but quiet. A retired military dog, Emma thought. Then she looked away. She did not need to invite the past into the room. It had found enough doors on its own. Emma approached the counter and placed the velvet pouch on the glass. Marvin looked at it, then at her scrubs beneath her jacket, then at the tired shape of her face. "What have you got?" he asked. "Military medals," Emma said. Marvin's expression changed slightly. Not sympathy, something closer to caution. He untied the pouch and tipped the contents gently onto the counter. The medals slid out one by one, dull gold and bronze against scratched glass. He picked up the first, turned it, read the engraving, set it down, picked up the next. "These yours?" he asked. "Yes." "You got documentation?" Emma almost laughed, but there was no humor in her chest. "No." Marvin pushed his glasses higher. "Without paperwork, I can give you $300 for the lot. Maybe $320 if the citation checks out later. $300. Less than rent. More than nothing." Emma stared at the medals. For a moment, she did not see Marvin or the shop. She saw dust rising from a road in Afghanistan. She saw a map glowing on a cracked screen. She saw a line of vehicles waiting for an order she knew would kill them. She saw a young soldier named Riley Price grinning at her with sunflower seeds tucked in his cheek, saying, "Doc, you always look like you know the punchline before the joke starts." Riley had been 23. He had made bad coffee and worse jokes. He had lived because Emma had refused to send his convoy into a valley marked by death. 12 soldiers had lived. The official record said she had endangered the mission. Her thumb touched the edge of the combat medical badge. 300 works, she said. She reached for her ID. That was when Rocky moved. There was no bark, no growl, no scramble of claws. Just motion, sudden and silent, like a decision made by something older than language. 1 second the German shepherd was beside the man in the field jacket. The next, he crossed the scuffed linoleum with clean, deliberate steps and stopped at Emma's left side. Then he sat, not near her, beside her, close enough that his shoulder touched her leg. Emma froze. The shop went quiet in a way silence rarely did. Even Marvin stopped moving. The man in the field jacket turned slowly, and every trace of casual interest disappeared from his face. "Rocky," he said. The dog did not move. The man's voice lowered. "Heel." Rocky's ears shifted, proving he had heard. But he stayed where he was, seated beside Emma with calm certainty. Eyes forward, body still. Emma looked down. Rocky looked up at her. Something passed through her chest so quickly that it almost hurt. Not fear. Not recognition exactly. Something gentler and more dangerous. Like the first crack in a wall she had spent years building. "Rocky," the man said again, firmer now. The dog remained. Marvin cleared his throat. "That dog usually do that?" "No," the man said. One word. Flat. Absolute. He crossed the shop toward them, boots quiet against the floor. Up close, Emma saw that his eyes were hazel with green near the center, watchful and tired. This was not a man who trusted easily. His face was all angles. High cheekbones, square jaw, a nose that had been broken once and healed slightly crooked. He carried grief the way soldiers carried old injuries, not openly, but in the small habits of movement. He stopped at the counter and looked at Rocky, then at Emma, then at the medals spread between them. "May I?" he asked. Emma should have said no. Instead, she stepped back half an inch. The man picked up the engraved medal and turned it over. The change in him was small, but Emma saw it. His hand stilled. His jaw tightened. His eyes moved across the words once, then again. "Staff Sergeant Emma Bennett, 8th Medical Brigade." He looked at her. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Emma felt the old door inside her shudder against its hinges. "It's mine," she said. Marvin glanced between them, suddenly aware that the shop had become a place where something larger than money was happening. The man set the medal down carefully, not like an object, like evidence, like a bone recovered from sacred ground. "You're Emma Bennett," he said. She did not answer. "My name is Nathan Cole," he continued. "Former Navy SEAL. I worked joint operations with your brigade in 2016. Emma's stomach tightened. Nathan Cole. The name struck a faint bell somewhere in memory. Cole had been attached to another unit. Special operations. Quiet men who came and went with no official explanation. She remembered hearing about a Cole once. A man who had dragged 2 wounded Marines through irrigation water under machine gun fire. A man with a dog that had detected a bomb seconds before a convoy rolled over it. "Rocky." Emma looked down again. The dog was still watching her. Nathan's voice softened, but only slightly. "I heard what happened to you." Emma reached for the medals. "Then you heard a story." "I heard the official version," Nathan said. "And I heard enough from men who were there to know it wasn't the whole truth." Her fingers closed around the pouch. "I don't talk about it. I'm not asking you to. You just did." A faint flicker crossed Nathan's face. Not amusement. Respect, perhaps. Or pain recognizing its own reflection. Behind the counter, Marvin shifted awkwardly. "Miss Bennett, you still want to?" "No," Emma said. The word surprised even her. She gathered the medals quickly, almost clumsily, and shoved them back into the pouch. The practical part of her mind shouted that rent was still due, that pride did not pay electric bills, that dead coffee makers did not resurrect themselves because a dog had looked at her kindly. But another part of her, older and quieter, had already made the decision. She could not sell them now. Not after Rocky had sat beside her like a witness. Not after Nathan Cole had spoken her name as if it had not been erased. Emma turned to leave. "Emma," Nathan said. She stopped, but did not turn around. "If someone comes asking about you," he said, "or if anything strange happens, call me." She looked over her shoulder. Why would anything strange happen? Nathan's eyes moved briefly to Rocky, then back to her. Because dogs like him don't break formation for no reason. Emma held his gaze for one breath, two, then walked out into the cold Montana morning with the velvet pouch still in her pocket and Rocky's eyes following her through the glass. That night, Mountain View Regional Hospital glowed on the hill above Cedar Ridge like a ship full of tired souls. The building was 6 stories of beige concrete and bright windows, with an emergency entrance that never slept. Ambulances came and went under fluorescent lights. The automatic doors sighed open every few minutes, releasing warmth, antiseptic smell, fear, and human need. Emma clocked in at 6:52 p.m. She had slept 4 hours. She had eaten toast with peanut butter. She had paid nothing, solved nothing, fixed nothing. But she had put on clean scrubs, tied her hair back, and shown up because patients did not care about your past when they could not breathe. At the nurse's station, Grace Miller handed her the assignment sheet. Grace was the night charge nurse, a compact black woman in her early 50s with silver-threaded curls pinned close to her head and sharp brown eyes that missed almost nothing. She had worked at Mountain View for 22 years, long enough to develop 2 facial expressions, one that comforted frightened families and one that made arrogant interns reconsider their entire personality. Grace believed in kindness, but never in foolishness. She had once told Emma, "Hospitals run on 3 things: oxygen, documentation, and nurses who refuse to die." "You look like boiled rainwater," Grace said. "Thank you. That was not a compliment. I received it as one." Grace snorted and handed her a coffee from the station. "Drink, before you start haunting the hallway." Emma took it. "You're a saint." "No. Saints forgive people. I keep lists." For the first hour, the shift moved with deceptive calm. Emma checked on 2 post-surgical patients, adjusted fluids for an elderly woman with pneumonia, reassured a teenager with dehydration, and helped a confused man find his glasses, which were on his forehead. She moved through the halls with quiet efficiency. Her hands were gentle. Her charting was exact. Her voice changed depending on who needed it. Soft for fear, firm for panic, light for children, steady for pain. But part of her remained in Kepler's pawn and exchange. Rocky sitting beside her. Nathan reading her name. The past lifting its head. At 8:17 p.m., Grace appeared at Emma's elbow near room 214. "I want your eyes on someone," Grace said. Emma looked up from the computer. "Who?" "Room 219. Daniel Whitaker, 48. Came in with back pain and nausea. Dr. Lyle thinks kidney stone." The name Dr. Lyle carried its own warning. Dr. Kevin Lyle was a first-year resident with a handsome face, soft hands, and the fragile confidence of someone who had been praised too early in life. He was 29, tall and narrow, with neatly parted black hair and a habit of explaining things nurses already understood. He was not cruel. That almost made him more dangerous. Cruel doctors could be predicted. Inexperienced doctors with pride could kill someone while believing they were being reasonable. "What bothers you?" Emma asked. Grace's mouth tightened. "His color, his pressure, and his wife. The wife. She keeps saying he never complains." Emma was already moving. Daniel Whitaker lay in room 219 with the stiff stillness of a man trying not to alarm anyone. He was broad, maybe 200 pounds, with thinning sandy hair stuck damply to his forehead. His skin had a waxy gray tone that made Emma's attention sharpen immediately. Beside him sat his wife, Linda Whitaker, a small woman in her mid-40s with freckled skin, red-rimmed eyes, and both hands wrapped around her purse strap as if it were a rope keeping her from falling. Linda had the look of someone who had spent 20 years loving a stubborn man and was now terrified that stubbornness might cost him his life. Emma pulled the stool beside the bed. "Mr. Whitaker, I'm Emma. Tell me what's going on." Daniel tried to smile. "Apparently I'm dramatic." Linda leaned forward. "He is not dramatic. He once finished mowing the lawn with a broken toe." "Linda," Daniel murmured. "That is not normal, Daniel." Emma almost smiled. "Almost. Where is the pain now?" "Started in my back," Daniel said. His breath hitched. "Left side mostly. Then lower stomach. Now it's deeper." Sharp? Burning? Tearing? He hesitated. Emma watched his hesitation more than his answer. Tearing, he said quietly. The room changed. Not visibly. Not for anyone else. But Emma felt the air tighten around that word. She checked his pulse. Fast, but not wildly so. She lifted the blanket and examined his abdomen. There. Subtle distension. Asymmetry. A faint pulsing quality that turned her blood cold. What tests have been done? She asked. Linda answered. Urine. Blood. They said CT later if he doesn't improve. Emma stood. I'll be right back. She found Dr. Lyle at the nurse's station typing with the intense expression of a man documenting certainty. Room 219 needs reassessment, Emma said. His pain has migrated. He describes it as tearing. His abdomen is distended, and I'm concerned about an abdominal aortic aneurysm. Dr. Lyle looked up slowly. He's 48. AAA can happen at 48. He has flank pain and hematuria. He also has uncontrolled hypertension, a tearing description, and abdominal findings. His face tightened. I've already assessed him. I'm asking you to assess him again. And I'm telling you he's stable for observation. Grace, standing behind the counter, went very still. Emma kept her voice low. If he dissects while waiting for observation, he will die. Dr. Lal pushed back from the computer. Nurse Bennett, I appreciate your concern, but you are not the physician. The sentence landed in the station like a dropped tray. Emma felt something old and familiar move inside her. Men with authority. Men with maps. Men saying stay in your lane while people walked toward death. She saw the Afghan Valley again for half a heartbeat. Then she breathed. No, she said quietly. I'm the nurse standing closest to the patient who is changing in real time. Grace stepped forward. Dr. Lyle, call attending. He looked at Grace, then at Emma. Pride and fear battled across his face. At that exact moment, an alarm sounded from room 219. Linda screamed. Emma ran. Daniel Whitaker had gone pale as paper. His pressure was dropping. His pulse was racing now, thin and fast beneath Emma's fingers. Get vascular surgery now. Emma shouted. 2 large-bore IVs. Type and cross. Call CT, but do not wait if vascular says, or. Dr. Lyle appeared in the doorway, all color drained from his face. Emma did not look at him. There was no time for blame. Blame was for later, if the living remained. The next 20 minutes became controlled thunder. Grace moved like a general of the night shift, snapping orders with holy precision. Linda was guided out by a young nurse named Sophie Reed, a quiet 24-year-old with blonde hair and a messy bun and the tender face of someone still learning how much fear a hospital could hold. The vascular surgeon, Dr. Priya Shah, arrived 9 minutes after the call. Dr. Shah was in her early 40s, tall, brown-skinned, with black hair braided tightly down her back and eyes like polished steel. She had a reputation for being blunt, brilliant, and allergic to excuses. She examined Daniel for less than a minute. Or, Dr. Shah said. Now. As they rolled him out, Linda grabbed Emma's wrist. Is he going to die? Emma could have lied. Many people wanted lies in hospitals. Soft lies. Warm lies. Lies that tucked them in. Instead, she covered Linda's hand with her own. He is very sick, Emma said. But we caught it while there is still a chance. Linda nodded as if those words were a plank thrown into dark water. At 10:06 p.m., Daniel Whitaker entered surgery for a leaking abdominal aortic aneurysm. At 11:38 p.m., Dr. Shah called the unit. He's alive, Grace said after hanging up. Then she looked at Emma. Because you pushed. Emma went back to charting. Her hands were steady, but inside, something trembled. Not triumph. Memory. Because saving someone always brought back the ones she could not save, and the ones she had saved at a cost no court had ever cared to understand. At 2:14 a.m., Lynette Harrow arrived on the unit. Everyone saw her before she spoke. Lynette was the director of nursing operations at Mountain View, a tall white woman in her late 40s with a narrow figure, smooth ash-blonde hair cut to her jaw, and pale green eyes that never seemed to warm. She dressed in tailored navy suits and sensible heels that clicked like punctuation on hospital floors. Lynette believed rules were the bones of an institution. Unfortunately, she often forgot that patients were the heart. She carried a tablet against her chest. Emma Bennett, she said. Emma looked up from the medication room doorway. Can we speak privately? Grace's eyes narrowed. Emma felt the day's exhaustion settle into a cold line down her spine. Of course, she said. They entered a small consultation room used mostly for difficult family conversations. The walls were beige. The tissues were untouched. A painting of a mountain lake hung crookedly above a fake plant. Lynette closed the door. "This is an administrative matter," she began. Those words never arrived carrying mercy. Emma waited. "We have been reviewing personnel files," Lynette said. "Specifically credentialing records, prior employment disclosures, and licensure documentation." Emma's face remained still. Lynette glanced at the tablet. "There appear to be inconsistencies in your file." "What inconsistencies?" "Gaps in your employment history, incomplete verification from a previous institution, and a notation connected to your nursing license." "The notation is under review," Emma said. "It was filed anonymously and contains no substantiated clinical finding. Nevertheless, it exists. I have documentation." "I'm sure you do." Lynette's tone made the words smaller than they were. "But until this is clarified, the hospital must protect itself." Emma stared at her. There it was. Not protect patients. Protect itself. A phrase as old as every institution that had ever sacrificed a person to save a reputation. "You're placing me on leave," Emma said. "Administrative suspension," Lynette corrected. "Effective immediately. I have patients. Your patients will be reassigned. I need to hand them off properly." "That will be handled." Emma leaned back slightly. Her voice stayed calm because if she let it rise, Lynette would write unstable in some private corner of her mind. "Daniel Whitaker is alive because this unit did not ignore a change in condition tonight," Emma said. "Please make sure that same commitment to patient safety continues after I leave." For the first time, Lynette's composure flickered. "This is not about tonight's clinical event." "No," Emma said. "I don't imagine it is." The silence between them grew sharp. Emma signed nothing. She requested copies of the suspension notice. Lynette said they would be emailed. Emma knew better than to trust that, so she asked Grace to witness the time and reason given. Grace did, standing at the station with her arms folded, looking at Lynette as if she were memorizing her for future testimony. At 3:02 a.m., Emma walked out of Mountain View Regional Hospital with her jacket over her scrubs and the velvet pouch still in her pocket. The parking lot was half empty. Frost silvered the windshields. Above Cedar Ridge, the mountains stood black against a moonlit sky. Emma reached her old sedan and stopped. For one wild second, she wanted to laugh. She had saved a man's life and lost her job in the same night. That was almost funny, in the way tragedy sometimes wore a clown nose, because even sorrow got tired of being serious. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. 4 words appeared on the screen. "We are watching you." Emma did not move. The cold entered her hands. Her breath fogged in front of her face. Across the parking lot, near the visitor entrance, a dark SUV sat with its headlights off. She could not see who was inside. Then, from somewhere in memory, came Rocky's eyes. Steady, certain, refusing to leave. Emma took a screenshot of the message, sent it to her own email. Then she looked toward the SUV and held the phone up just long enough to make sure whoever watched her knew she had preserved it. The SUV engine started. It pulled away slowly. Emma stood alone in the frozen hospital lot. No job, no rent money, no protection, and no illusion left that the past was finished with her. But for the first time in years, beneath the fear, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the old shame they had tried to bury her under, something else stirred. Not hope yet. Hope was too bright a word. This was smaller, harder. A coal under ash. Someone was afraid of her. And somewhere in Cedar Ridge, a retired Navy SEAL and a German shepherd named Rocky already knew she was worth finding. Emma Bennett did not drive home immediately. She sat inside her old sedan in the far corner of the Mountain View Regional Hospital parking lot, the heater clicking weakly, the windshield filmed with frost, and the message glowing on her phone like a coal pulled from a fire. "We are watching you." 4 words. No name. No explanation. No threat specific enough to report cleanly, yet sharp enough to slide beneath the ribs and stay there. She read it once, then again, not because she did not understand it, but because part of her still wanted the words to become something else if she stared long enough. They did not. Across the lot, the dark SUV had already disappeared into the cold streets of Cedar Ridge, leaving behind only tire tracks and the kind of silence that made every light pole look like a witness. Emma had survived mortar fire, battlefield amputations, command hearings, and the slow public death of her own name. Fear was not new to her, but this fear was different. Combat fear arrived honestly. It announced itself with noise and dust and blood. This fear wore office shoes. It hid behind forms, anonymous complaints, missing files, and now a text message sent at 3 in the morning after she had just been suspended for reasons that were not reasons at all. She took a screenshot, emailed it to herself, then forwarded it to an old encrypted account she had not used in almost a year. Her hands moved with the old precision. Evidence first, feelings later. That had once kept people alive. It might keep her alive now. Her phone buzzed again. This time the number was not unknown. Nathan Cole. Emma stared at the name. She had entered it earlier only because he had pressed a business card into her hand before she left the pawn shop. She had told herself she would never use it. Life, apparently, had a mean sense of humor and liked to wait until a person made absolute declarations before tossing them into a ditch. She answered but said nothing. Nathan's voice came through low and controlled. Emma, how did you know to call? A pause. Not guilt. Calculation. Rocky wouldn't settle. Despite everything, Emma almost laughed. It came out as a breath. That is not an answer. It is the only honest one I have. He's been pacing since midnight. Door to window, window to door. That dog slept through artillery when he was younger. He does not pace unless something is wrong. Emma looked out at the empty lot. Something is wrong. Nathan's voice changed. It did not rise. It hardened. Where are you? Hospital parking lot. You're alone? Yes. Stay in your car. Lock the doors. I'm 10 minutes away. I didn't ask for rescue. No, Nathan said. You answered the phone. That's close enough for tonight. She should have argued. She wanted to argue. Pride was a stubborn little animal, and hers had survived on scraps for years. But she was tired, jobless, watched, and suddenly aware that whatever had started years ago had not ended when she removed her uniform. It had simply waited for her to become isolated enough to corner. So she locked the doors and stayed. Nathan arrived in 9 minutes in a dark green pickup with a cracked rear bumper and mud dried along the wheel wells. Rocky sat upright in the passenger seat, his ears high, his broad chest outlined against the dashboard light. When the truck pulled beside Emma's sedan, Rocky looked directly at her through the glass. Not around her, not past her, at her, like he had known exactly where she would be. Nathan stepped out wearing the same weathered field jacket from the pawn shop. In the hospital lights, he looked more tired than before. The scar near his brow pulled slightly when he narrowed his eyes at the lot. He was the kind of man who had learned not to waste movement. Every turn of his head had purpose. Every pause had listening inside it. His beard was rough along his jaw, dark blonde with threads of gray near the chin, and there was a small white mark under his left ear that looked like the memory of shrapnel or a knife. He tapped once on Emma's window. She lowered it halfway. Show me, he said. She held up the phone. Nathan read the message, and something very old passed behind his eyes. Recognition, not surprise. You expected this, Emma said. I expected something. Because of Rocky. Because of you. That landed harder than she wanted it to. Nathan looked toward the hospital entrance. You were suspended tonight? Emma said nothing. Emma. They called it administrative suspension. Credentialing inconsistencies. A license notation. Her mouth twisted. All the pretty words institutions use when they want to hurt someone without leaving fingerprints. Nathan's jaw tightened. When did the license notation appear? 7 months ago. After you tried to request your military records? Emma stared at him. That was answer enough. He looked down, exhaled slowly, then opened the rear door of his truck. Rocky jumped down with controlled grace for a dog his size. Up close, Emma could see the years on him. He was not young. 7, maybe 8. There was silver across his muzzle and around his eyes, but his body still held power, broad through the shoulders, lean through the waist, paws large and steady on the icy pavement. His coat was thick, black and tan, with a small white scar cutting through the fur near his right shoulder. One ear had a slight nick at the tip. A warrior's ear, Emma thought before she could stop herself. Rocky approached her door and sat. Again. Nathan watched him carefully. He did that the first time he met you. Now he's doing it again. Maybe he likes exhausted nurses. He likes beef jerky, open fields, and one retired Marine in Idaho who scratches behind his left ear. He does not attach himself to strangers. Emma looked down at Rocky. The dog's eyes were calm, but not soft. He was not begging. He was guarding. That realization moved through her like cold water. Nathan gestured toward the road. My house is safer than your apartment tonight. No, Emma. No, she repeated, sharper this time. I don't know you. You know enough to know I'm not the one who sent that message. I know you knew my name before I wanted you to. Nathan absorbed that without offense. A lesser man might have defended himself. He did not. Fair. His willingness not to argue made her more uneasy than anger would have. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, then handed it through the window. Then don't come with me. Go somewhere public. A diner. A police station parking lot. Anywhere with cameras. But before you decide I'm just another ghost from your past, read that. Emma unfolded it. It was a list of names. 9 of them. The 4th name was hers. Emma Bennett, 8th Medical Brigade, Iron Falcon, discharged following command refusal. Above hers were 3 others. Below hers were 5 more. Each had a unit, a date, and a short note. Record correction denied. Medical board dispute. Misconduct finding. Security clearance revoked. Appeal lost. Complaint suppressed. She read the list twice. What is this? Nathan's face had no softness left now. The reason Rocky and I were in that pawn shop. Emma's stomach tightened. You followed me? No. I was following the medals. That sounds worse. I know. Nathan glanced at the hospital behind her. 3 months ago, a retired sergeant named Caleb Rourke contacted me. He served in a support unit attached to your brigade. 56 years old now, heavy set, bad knees, gray mustache. One of those men who tries to sound cheerful because if he stops talking the grief catches him. He said he had been searching for people connected to a pattern. People who warned command, refused orders, reported misconduct, or documented illegal activity. People whose careers ended right after. Emma felt her throat tighten. Nathan continued. Caleb had your name, but he did not know where you were. He only knew you once had family in Montana. I started looking. Quietly. Then your medals turned up in a Veterans Collector Forum last week. Emma blinked. What? Marvin Kepler posts items online before he buys them if he thinks they may have collector value. He took a photo when you called asking if he purchased military medals. I didn't give him my name. The engraving did. A hot pulse of anger moved through her. Marvin had not even owned them yet. Already her name had been turned into inventory. Nathan saw it. I am not defending him. I'm telling you how I found you. Emma lowered the paper. Why? Because what happened to you happened to others. And the same name appears behind all of it. She already knew before he said it. Some names did not need to be spoken to enter a room. Victor Langford, Nathan said. The parking lot seemed to grow colder. Lieutenant General Victor Langford had once been Colonel Victor Langford, commander of the operational theater where Iron Falcon had unfolded. Emma remembered his face from briefings. Tall, silver-haired even then, handsome in a carved marble way, with blue eyes that never seemed to blink when lower-ranking people spoke. Langford was not loud. That was part of his danger. He had the smooth, restrained manners of a man who never needed to shout because systems shouted for him. He called bad decisions necessary. He called fear discipline. He called obedience honor, especially when someone else paid for it in blood. He's still climbing, Nathan said. He's being considered for Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Special Operations Oversight. It is not a combat command, but it gives him access to personnel records, internal reviews, classified operational audits, and investigations that can be redirected before they grow teeth. Emma stared at the list in her lap. You think he is cleaning up old problems before confirmation. I think someone is. She looked at him. And you think I'm one of the problems? No, Nathan said. I think you are one of the witnesses. The word witness pressed against something inside her. Witnesses had duty. Witnesses had danger. Witnesses could not pretend they had not seen the altar where truth was sacrificed. Emma's gaze dropped to Rocky. The dog had not moved. What do you want from me? She asked. Not here. I'm not going to your house. I have an office above a closed feed store on Ash Street. Cameras outside. Back exit. Rocky knows the building. You can park across the street and leave whenever you want. That is supposed to reassure me? A little. This time, despite herself, she did laugh. Just once. Dry and small. Nathan's mouth almost curved. Almost. The expression faded before it became a smile. Emma looked at the hospital, then at the road, then at the message again. We are watching you. She had spent years pretending silence was safety. Tonight had proven silence was only a cage with softer walls. "All right," she said. "I follow in my car. If you take one strange turn, I disappear." Nathan nodded. "That's exactly what you should do." The office above the feed store was not an office in any respectable sense. It was 2 rooms with old wooden floors, a humming space heater, a metal desk, 3 filing cabinets, and a whiteboard covered with names, arrows, dates, and unit designations. The building below still smelled faintly of hay, grain, and motor oil. A single lamp lit the room with amber light, making the place feel less like an investigation center and more like a bunker built by a man who trusted paper more than institutions. Rocky entered first, checked the room with methodical interest, then settled near the door facing the stairs. Emma noticed that. Nathan noticed her noticing. "He always puts himself between the room and the way in," he said. "Good habit. He learned from better people than me." There was grief in that sentence, quick and hidden. Emma did not ask. Nathan removed a folder from the desk and opened it. Inside were printed articles, redacted military documents, appeal denials, handwritten notes, and photographs of men and women Emma did not know but immediately recognized. Not their faces, their expressions. That same look veterans wore when the war had ended everywhere except inside their bodies. "This is Caleb Rourke," Nathan said, pointing to a photo of a stocky man with a sunburned face, thick gray mustache, and tired eyes that still held stubborn kindness. "Logistics sergeant. Reported missing fuel convoys during Langford's command. 3 months later, accused of theft. Cleared informally, ruined officially." He pointed to another. "Maya Delgado. Army intelligence analyst. 42 now. Short, black hair, sharp as broken glass. One of the smartest people I've ever spoken to. She flagged altered drone footage tied to Iron Falcon's aftermath. Lost her clearance. Now she teaches math in New Mexico and checks her windows every night." Another. Thomas Vale. Communications officer. Tall, red-haired, former college wrestler. Filed a concern about comms logs being pulled after operational incidents. He was pushed out for alcohol misconduct. He has been sober 12 years. The incident report says he was drunk on duty. The breath test record is missing. Emma's hands went cold. Nathan turned another page. 8 former service members besides you. Different units, same theater, overlapping command structure, same result. They raised something, refused something, documented something, or asked the wrong question. Then paperwork swallowed them. Paperwork swallowed them. The phrase almost made Emma close her eyes. She had thought her destruction was personal. For years, she had carried it like a brand burned into her alone. Shame was easier to maintain when it had no neighbors. Now she was looking at a map of people buried in the same field. Nathan watched her carefully. Iron Falcon was the center. Emma stepped away from the desk. The room seemed too small. The space heater too loud. The old floor under her boots too thin to hold the weight of Afghanistan rising beneath it. "I told you," she said. "I don't talk about it." "I know. Then why say the name?" "Because someone else just did." He handed her a printed email. It was heavily redacted, but one line remained visible. Subject: Iron Falcon residual exposure. Bennett file unresolved. Emma read it once. Her chest constricted. "Where did you get this?" "Maya Delgado. She still has friends inside records management. Someone searched your file 18 days ago." The number struck her like a hand against the sternum. 18 days. That was before the nursing board notation escalated? Emma swallowed. "The hospital asked me for additional license clarification 16 days ago." Nathan nodded grimly. "That is not coincidence." Emma put the page down slowly, as if sudden movement might make the world collapse. Nathan leaned against the desk, arms folded. "I need to know what happened during Iron Falcon." "No, I don't need feelings. I need structure. Date, order, route, refusal, outcome." "No," she said again, but less firmly. Nathan's voice softened. 12 soldiers lived because of what you did." Her eyes snapped to his. "Do not use them to pull words out of me." He went still. "You're right. I'm sorry." The apology disarmed her more than pressure would have. For a while, neither of them spoke. Rocky lifted his head, watching Emma with patient attention. Outside, a truck passed on the street below, its tires hissing over wet pavement. Finally, Emma walked to the window. Cedar Ridge lay quiet beneath her, streetlights glowing on patches of old snow. She could see the hospital hill in the distance. Somewhere inside, Daniel Whitaker was alive because she had refused to let a bad assumption become a death sentence. She had done that before. In another country. Under another sky. Iron Falcon was supposed to be a supply protection operation, she said. Nathan did not move. He did not reach for a recorder. Smart man. If he had, she would have stopped. Officially, we were supporting a route clearance convoy through the Arghandab corridor. Unofficially, there was a special operations element moving through the same window. Nobody told us why. They never did. Her voice stayed flat, but her hands had curled around her own arms. 72 hours before movement, intelligence reports showed unusual traffic in a valley east of the designated route. Not clear proof of an ambush. Just patterns. Too many local vehicles disappearing from roads. Too few children visible near compounds. Radio silence in places that were usually noisy. Dogs gone from courtyards. Nathan's eyes sharpened at that. He understood dogs gone from courtyards. Anyone who had worked hostile terrain did. I flagged it, Emma said. My immediate superior said he would pass it up. Then the order came down anyway. Same route. Same timing. No delay. No air overwatch adjustment. No change. From Langford, through Langford's command channel. Her jaw tightened. I was senior medic in the second convoy element. I had 12 people under my direct medical coverage, including 3 attached specialists who were not supposed to be there. We were told to proceed into the valley. And you refused. I redirected our vehicles along an irrigation road parallel to the planned route. Slower. Messier. Less exposed. I documented the deviation in real time, with medical risk justification based on casualty probability. Nathan's face remained controlled, but something in his eyes shifted. Admiration, maybe, or anger on her behalf. 40 minutes later, Emma said, the original route was hit. Silence filled the room. She could still hear it. Even now. Radio chaos. Voices clipped by static. Someone screaming grid coordinates. Someone else shouting for smoke. The distant thud of explosions arriving through comms like thunder from a storm beyond the horizon. Our element survived, she continued. The team that followed the original route did not all survive. Command needed blame that did not climb upward. I had disobeyed an order. That made me useful. Nathan's voice was quiet. They said you compromised the operation. They said I created confusion that delayed support. They said my deviation contributed to casualties. They said I acted emotionally, without complete information. Did you? Emma turned from the window. Her eyes were bright now, but no tears fell. Yes. Nathan waited. I acted emotionally because I cared whether 12 people lived. I acted without complete information because no one in war ever has complete information. I disobeyed because the order was wrong. Rocky stood, crossed the room, and pressed his head lightly against Emma's thigh. She stopped breathing for a second. Nathan looked away, not because he was embarrassed, but because he understood some moments were not meant to be watched too closely. Emma lowered her hand slowly to Rocky's head. His fur was warm and thick under her fingers. The steadiness of him entered her like a borrowed heartbeat. Nathan spoke after a long moment. They discharged you 6 weeks later. 5 weeks and 4 days. Dishonorable. Other than honorable, officially. Functionally, it killed everything. Veterans' benefits delayed. Medical record access restricted. Employment complicated. Every appeal slowed by missing documents. Her mouth hardened. The kind of punishment designed by people who understand bureaucracy better than bullets. Nathan nodded toward the folder. That matches the others. Emma looked at the whiteboard. Why now? Langford could have left us buried. Promotion, Nathan said. Higher office means more scrutiny, but also more power once confirmed. Someone is probably cleaning loose ends before hearings. Making sure old appeals stay dead. Making sure any witness looks unstable, disgruntled, or professionally compromised. The nursing board complaint. The suspension. The message. Emma laughed softly, without humor. Efficient. Langford was always efficient, Nathan said. The way he said it made her study him. You knew him. Nathan's gaze drifted to Rocky. I knew what his decisions cost. For the first time, Emma saw the grief beneath his discipline more clearly. It lived in the lines around his mouth, in the way his shoulders settled whenever Iron Falcon was named. Who, she asked. Nathan was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. My younger brother, he said finally. Eli Cole, Marine Corps radio operator attached to a joint task unit. 26 years old. Tall, skinny, always hungry, laughed at everything, even things that deserved solemn respect. He used to say serious men died early because they gave death too much attention. Emma's throat closed. He was on the original route. The words seemed to remove the air from the room. Nathan looked at her, and there was no accusation in his face. That was almost worse. He died in the ambush, Nathan said. Rocky found him. Emma's hand tightened in Rocky's fur. The dog did not move. I'm sorry, Emma whispered. I know, Nathan said. And I know your convoy lived because you made the right call. Eli did not die because you disobeyed. He died because someone sent them into a kill box after multiple warnings. Emma looked at him for a long time. For years, every version of the story had found a way to place blame near her hands. Hearing someone move it away felt less like comfort than vertigo. Nathan straightened. There is something else. Emma almost said, of course there is, because apparently tragedy had developed a fondness for sequels. He pulled a small black case from the bottom desk drawer. Inside was a portable scanner, 2 encrypted drives, and several sealed evidence sleeves. I need whatever records you still have. Emma's guard rose instantly. I didn't say I had any. Nathan's expression did not change. You would not have survived this long without keeping something. That was too accurate. She stepped back from Rocky and folded her arms. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. Not completely. But you can verify me. Nathan pointed to a name on the whiteboard. Daniel Brooks. Federal investigator. Former inspector with the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. He is not in the chain Langford controls. He is cautious, unpleasant on bad days, and allergic to dramatic claims unless paper supports them. He agreed to look at the pattern if we could bring him primary documentation. Describe him. Nathan blinked once, then nodded, understanding the test. Daniel Brooks is 51, black, 6 feet even, close-cropped hair, no beard, wears rectangular glasses when reading but hates needing them. He has a scar across the back of his right hand from a car bombing investigation in Iraq. He speaks slowly when he is angry, which makes people underestimate how angry he is. His wife died of cancer 8 years ago, and since then he has treated work like a religion he does not enjoy but cannot abandon. Emma listened. Details mattered. Liars often decorated the wrong parts of a room. And why would he help? Because his first investigation as a young officer was buried after a witness recanted under pressure. The witness killed himself 6 months later. Brooks has been paying that debt ever since. Emma looked at the evidence sleeves. In her apartment, hidden beneath the false bottom of a storage trunk, were copies of her field notes, a printed route map, 3 signed medical risk objections, and 1 damaged flash drive she had never managed to decrypt. She had kept them not because she believed justice would come. She had kept them because throwing them away felt like killing the truth with her own hands. I have some records, she said. Nathan did not look triumphant. Good. Triumph would have made her leave. Where? Safe. Can you access them tonight? Emma checked the clock. 4:11 a.m. The sensible answer was no. The tired answer was no. The frightened answer was definitely no. But the message on her phone had changed the arithmetic. If someone knew enough to threaten her at the hospital, they might know where she lived. If they knew where she lived, her hidden records were no longer hidden. The past was no longer buried. It was evidence waiting to be stolen. Yes, she said. Nathan reached for his keys. Rocky was already on his feet. They drove in separate vehicles to Emma's apartment complex, a low brick building on the east side of Cedar Ridge where the stairwell smelled of old carpet and someone's overcooked dinner. Nathan parked across the street while Emma went inside alone. She insisted. He did not like it. Rocky liked it even less. The dog stood beside Nathan's truck, ears forward, watching the building with his body held like a drawn bow. Emma's apartment looked exactly as she had left it. Dead coffee maker. Envelopes. Thin blanket folded on the couch. A pair of work shoes by the door. She crossed to the storage trunk at the foot of her bed, lifted out winter clothes, removed the false bottom, and took out a sealed waterproof envelope. For a moment, she held it against her chest. This was the weight of 5 years. Not heavy in the hand. Unbearable everywhere else. Then something creaked in the hallway. Emma went still. A soft sound followed. Not footsteps exactly. Pressure against the old floorboards outside her door. She turned off the lamp. Darkness swallowed the room. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. If you still want to live, forget that year. The English was too clean. Too deliberate. like someone translating menace through a lawyer's mouth. Emma did not breathe. From outside came a low growl. Rocky. Not barking. Growling. Deep. Controlled. Terrible. Then Nathan's voice cut through the hallway, cold as iron. Step away from the door. A rush of movement. Boots pounding downstairs. Rocky barked once, explosive and sharp. A man cursed. A door slammed below. Emma opened her apartment door with the envelope under her jacket. Nathan stood in the hallway with Rocky at his side. His face was carved from stone. In his right hand, he held a small black device no bigger than a matchbox. What is that? Emma asked. Nathan looked at her doorframe. Not sure yet. He was placing it near your lock. Emma stared at the device. A tracker. A microphone. A warning. Maybe all three. Nathan handed her his phone. Call Brooks. Now. Emma looked at the stairwell where the intruder had fled, then at Rocky, whose fur still stood along his spine. The dog turned and pressed his shoulder against her leg, just as he had in the pawn shop, just as he had in the hospital lot, as if telling her the time for hiding had ended. Emma took Nathan's phone. When Daniel Brooks answered, his voice was low, gravelly, and alert, the voice of a man who had not slept much in years. Nathan, he said. Emma swallowed. This is Emma Bennett, she said. I have the Iron Falcon records. And someone just tried to get through my door. A silence. Then Brooks said, do not go back inside. Do not call local police yet. Put Nathan on. And Miss Bennett. Yes. If you are holding original documents, keep them on your body. From this point forward, those records are not memories. They are federal evidence. Emma looked down at the envelope under her arm. For years, those papers had been a grave. Now, at last, they were becoming a weapon. Daniel Brooks did not meet them in an office. That was the first thing Emma noticed, and it told her more about the situation than any official title could have. Men who trusted their buildings invited witnesses through front doors, signed them in beneath cameras, and let receptionists ask for identification. Men who suspected their own walls had ears chose closed places at the edge of town where no one came by accident. Daniel chose an abandoned county maintenance depot 7 miles outside Cedar Ridge, a low concrete building crouched beside a service road, half hidden by pine trees and old snowbanks. At dawn, the place looked like something the town had forgotten on purpose. Nathan drove first. Emma followed in her sedan with Rocky in the passenger seat because the dog had refused, with calm and absolute disrespect, to remain in Nathan's truck after the incident at her apartment. Nathan had opened his door and given one quiet command. Rocky had looked at him, looked at Emma, then jumped into her car as if the matter had been decided by a higher court. Even in fear, Emma had almost smiled. There was something ridiculous and holy about being assigned a 90-pound guardian by a retired military dog who apparently considered human plans advisory. Inside the depot, portable heaters hummed against the cold. Folding tables had been arranged beneath hanging work lights. A black SUV sat near the far wall, its hood still warm. 2 men in dark jackets stood near the entrance, both watchful, both silent. One was young and pale with nervous hands. The other was older, wide through the chest, with a shaved head and the patient expression of a man who had spent years standing between danger and paperwork. Daniel Brooks stood at the center table reading from a tablet. He looked exactly as Nathan had described, and somehow more severe in person. He was 51, a tall black man with close-cropped hair silvering at the temples, deep-set eyes behind rectangular reading glasses, and a face built more for judgment than friendliness. A faint scar crossed the back of his right hand, pale against dark skin, visible when he removed his glasses and set them on the table. He wore a charcoal overcoat over a plain white shirt and no tie. His shoes were polished, but his eyes looked like they had not forgiven the world for a long time. Daniel was not cold, Emma decided. Cold people felt nothing. Daniel felt too much and had trained every feeling to stand at attention. You're late, he said. Nathan looked at his watch. By 3 minutes. 3 minutes is enough time to die in the wrong hallway. Emma liked him a little for that. Not much. A little. Daniel turned to her. Emma Bennett. Yes. Former staff sergeant. Combat medic. 8th Medical Brigade. Discharged following Iron Falcon disciplinary proceeding. Her spine tightened. That is the version written by people who wanted me gone. I know. Daniel's voice was flat. That is why we are here. The older man near the entrance stepped forward. Daniel gestured toward him. This is Frank Mercer. Former Federal Protective Service. Now contract security for my office when I need people who understand silence. Frank is 63, built like a barn door, and has not smiled in a professional setting since 1998. Frank Mercer had brown skin weathered by sun, a thick gray beard trimmed close to his jaw, and arms that looked too large for his jacket. His eyes, however, were gentle in the quick way of men who had learned violence so they would not have to enjoy it. He nodded once to Emma. "Ma'am." The younger man gave a faint wave before Daniel even introduced him. "That is Owen Pike," Daniel said. "Technical analyst. 27. Brilliant with damaged drives. Useless with coffee machines. If he talks too fast, ignore every third word." Owen Pike was thin, freckled, and red-haired, with round glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He wore fingerless gloves despite the heaters and had the anxious brightness of someone whose brain ran ahead of his body. He smiled at Emma, then immediately seemed to regret smiling during a serious federal matter. "Sorry," Owen said. "I'm normal sometimes." "No, you aren't," Frank muttered. Rocky sneezed. For half a second, the room almost became human. Then Daniel's gaze dropped to the waterproof envelope under Emma's arm. The air changed. "Are those the originals?" he asked. "Some are copies. Some are contemporaneous notes. One flash drive I could never open. Chain of custody starts now." Daniel nodded to Owen, who opened a hard case containing evidence bags, labels, gloves, and a portable scanner. "You will describe each item. Owen will photograph it. Frank will witness. Nathan will stay quiet unless asked. Rocky will do whatever Rocky does, apparently." Rocky sat beside Emma, ears forward. Emma placed the envelope on the table. The act felt smaller than it should have. No thunder. No music. No angel descending with a flaming sword to announce that truth had finally arrived. Just paper sliding from a worn envelope under white work lights while tired people watched. But inside Emma, something ancient shifted. For years, the documents had been a grave. Now they were being lifted into daylight. She removed the first item, a folded route map from Iron Falcon, worn at the corners, marked with her handwriting in black ink. Then her personal field log. Then 3 medical risk objections, each signed, dated, and stamped with receipt codes. Then a printed email exchange with Captain Aaron Mendez, her immediate superior at the time, a compact, disciplined man whose careful replies had always carried the fear of someone trying to do the right thing without getting crushed beneath it. Then the damaged flash drive, black casing cracked along one side. Daniel did not interrupt. He let Emma speak. Her voice stayed steady until she reached the field log entry dated 2 days before the ambush. "I wrote this after the 3rd intelligence update," she said. "The one showing civilian movement away from the valley. I believe the route carried elevated casualty probability." Daniel leaned over the page, but did not touch it. "You used those exact words?" "Yes. Elevated casualty probability. I was a medic. That was the cleanest language they would not be able to dismiss as emotional." Daniel looked at her for a moment over his glasses. "They dismissed it anyway." "Yes." Owen photographed the page carefully. His nervousness faded when he worked. His hands became precise, delicate, almost reverent with fragile evidence. Emma noticed that and trusted him more. When the flash drive came out, Owen's eyes sharpened. "What happened to it?" he asked. "It was in my field bag during the proceedings. When they returned my belongings, the casing was cracked. I tried opening it later. Nothing." Owen turned it under the light. "Maybe dead. Maybe only pretending. Electronics are petty like that." Frank sighed. "Everything he says sounds like nonsense until it saves your case." Daniel sealed each item. "Miss Bennett, I need your verbal account on record today. Not full testimony. Initial statement. Enough to attach your documents to a preliminary inquiry." Emma looked at Nathan. He gave a small nod, not pushing, just present. She looked at Rocky. The dog leaned against her leg. "All right," she said. Daniel turned on a recorder. Initial interview. Emma Bennett. Cedar Ridge, Montana. Matter involving Iron Falcon documentation, alleged retaliatory discharge, suspected record suppression, and possible witness intimidation. Possible witness intimidation. Emma thought of the text message, the man outside her door, the device Nathan had taken from the frame. Possible was a bureaucratic word. It wore gloves while touching blood. She spoke for 94 minutes. She described the route, the intelligence changes, the missing children in villages, The dogs gone from courtyards, the command refusal, the alternate road, the ambush, the proceeding, the missing logs, the discharge, the years afterward. She did not decorate. She did not plead. She did not try to sound heroic. She sounded like a nurse charting a wound. Location, depth, bleeding, cause. Daniel asked questions only when precision mattered. What time was the route order transmitted? Approximately 0517 local. Who acknowledged it? Captain Mendez acknowledged receipt for our element. I objected verbally at 0522 and submitted written risk notation at 0529. Who rejected the objection? Command channel under Langford Authority. The voice responding was Major Ellis Crane. Daniel looked up. Describe Crane. Emma did. Major Ellis Crane had been 40 then, narrow-faced, sandy-haired, with pale lashes and a mouth that always looked as if he had just tasted something disappointing. He was the kind of officer who believed proximity to power was a personality. He had never shouted at Emma. He had smiled while destroying her, which was worse. Daniel wrote the name down. When she finished, the depot felt colder. Daniel turned off the recorder. The Office of Inspector General has opened a preliminary inquiry. Emma breathed in slowly. There it was. Not justice. Not yet. But a door that had been sealed for years had opened 1 inch. Daniel continued. Preliminary means fragile. It can widen into a formal investigation, or it can be strangled quietly if the evidence appears weak, contaminated, or politically inconvenient. Politically inconvenient, Emma repeated. Daniel's face did not change. That is where truth goes when powerful men wanted to die politely. Nathan folded his arms. Tell her about the witness. Daniel's gaze shifted to him. Emma saw it immediately. What witness? Daniel removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. For the first time, he looked older. Caleb Rourke contacted my office last night through Nathan's channel. He said he had original logistics notes linking irregular fuel movements to Iron Falcon and 2 later operations. He also claimed he could identify who ordered certain records transferred out of the standard archive. Emma remembered the name from Nathan's list. The cheerful man with bad knees and grief waiting behind his voice. Where is he? She asked. Driving from Idaho Falls to meet us, Nathan said. He refused to fly. Said airports made him feel like trapped livestock. Frank checked his watch. He should have called 40 minutes ago. The words had barely settled when Daniel's phone rang. Everyone in the depot went still. Daniel answered without greeting. He listened. His face changed by not changing at all, which Emma understood as bad news arriving to a disciplined man. Location? Daniel asked. A pause. Who has the scene? Another pause. Preserve everything. I want photographs before local tow touches the vehicle. No, do not assume weather. I said preserve everything. He ended the call. Nathan's jaw tightened. Caleb. Daniel looked at Emma. Caleb Rourke is dead. The depot became silent except for the heaters. Emma felt the words enter her slowly, as if her body refused to admit them all at once. How? She asked. Vehicle left the road 20 miles east of Butte. Single car crash. Report says black ice. Nathan's voice was flat. Was there black ice? Daniel put his glasses back on. That is what we are going to find out. Emma sat down because her legs had made the decision without consulting her. She had never met Caleb Rourke. She did not know his laugh, his bad knees, the exact shade of his mustache, whether he took sugar in coffee, whether he had children who would now receive a call that cracked their world. But she knew what it meant when a witness died on the way to speak. The world pretended coincidence was common because admitting design would require courage. Owen's phone chimed. He glanced at it, then went pale. Daniel, he said. Daniel turned. Owen swallowed. Caleb sent a file transfer link to the secure drop at 5:12 a.m. It arrived before the crash was reported. It's incomplete, but there's data. Daniel crossed the room in 3 strides. Open nothing on a network machine. I know. Air-gapped only. I know. Owen. The young analyst looked up, offended despite fear. I know. Within minutes, Owen had set up a small laptop from the hard case, one that had never touched the internet. His fingers moved fast. Lines of file names appeared, some corrupted, some partial. One folder labeled weather receipts made Owen sit back. That is either the most boring folder in America, he said, or the least. Daniel leaned over his shoulder. Owen opened it. Inside were scanned fuel logs, movement authorizations, and 3 photographs of signed transfer forms. One bore a familiar command routing stamp. Langford Authority. Emma stood behind them, hands cold. Daniel looked at the screen for a long time. Caleb got us enough to prove he was not imagining things. Nathan's face hardened, but not enough to explain who killed him. Daniel looked toward Frank. Get someone to Emma's apartment. Emma turned sharply. Why? Because if they moved on Caleb, they may move on your records next. They already tried. That was before they knew you had handed documents to me. Emma felt the room tilt slightly. My apartment. Nathan was already reaching for his keys. Daniel held up a hand. Frank goes first. You do not go rushing into a second scene blind. My home is not a scene. Daniel's eyes met hers. Miss Bennett, I say this with respect. It became a scene the moment someone tried to attach a device to your door. She hated him for being right. Frank left with one of the silent men from the entrance, a younger security contractor named Luis Ortega, who was introduced only as they moved. Luis was in his 30s, broad-shouldered, with short black hair, warm brown skin, and a quiet, observant manner. He had the gentle politeness of a man raised by a strict mother and the alert eyes of someone who had once survived an ambush by noticing a reflection in glass. He gave Emma a brief nod before leaving. They waited. Waiting was its own kind of battlefield. Nothing to do but listen to clocks, imagine worst outcomes, and pretend breathing was useful. Emma stood near Rocky, one hand resting on his head. Nathan watched the door. Daniel made 3 calls, each shorter than the last, each revealing less. Owen worked silently on Caleb's incomplete files, occasionally muttering insults at corrupted data as if it were a stubborn mule. At 9:26 a.m., Frank called. Daniel put him on speaker. Apartment door forced, Frank said. Interior tossed. Drawers, mattress, trunk, kitchen cabinets. They knew where to look, but not what they were looking for. Emma closed her eyes. Her apartment had never been much, but it had been hers. Small, cold in winter, too hot in August, with a sink that dripped and one window that stuck. Still hers. A place where she could remove the mask, eat crackers for dinner, and sit in silence without anyone demanding she explain why silence felt safer. Now strangers had torn through it. Frank continued. No one inside when we arrived. Neighbor says she heard noise around 7:40, but thought maintenance was working. Cameras? Daniel asked. Building has 2. One dead. One lobby camera working. Luis is pulling a copy. Emma opened her eyes. Rocky should come. Nathan looked at her. She did not know why she said it until she had. Maybe because Rocky had found the device. Maybe because he had chosen her. Maybe because some part of her trusted the dog's instincts more than any badge. Daniel considered her. You think the dog can identify the intruder? Nathan answered before Emma could. If the man at her door was also in her apartment, Rocky may track residual scent. Daniel looked at Rocky. Can he work indoors? Rocky stared back with grave insult. Nathan almost smiled. He can work anywhere. Daniel made the decision. We go together. No one touches anything unnecessarily. Miss Bennett, you stay behind Frank unless I say otherwise. Emma wanted to object. Then she imagined Daniel's answer and saved them both the time. Her apartment building looked smaller in daylight. Sadder. The brick walls were stained by old snowmelt. A plastic tricycle lay overturned near the entrance. Someone had taped a missing cat flyer to the lobby wall. Muffin, orange tabby, 15 years old, friendly but judgmental. Emma stared at the flyer for a second too long because it seemed unbearable that even lost cats had better public documentation than ruined soldiers. Her door hung crooked in the frame. Inside, her life had been emptied onto the floor. Clothes pulled from drawers. Mattress overturned. Books scattered. The storage trunk open and gutted. The false bottom removed. Kitchen cabinets hanging wide like mouths. The dead coffee maker lay smashed near the trash can, which felt unnecessary and therefore personal. Emma stood in the doorway and felt nothing. That frightened her more than grief would have. Nathan stood beside her, face dark. I'm sorry, he said. She looked at the wreckage. They broke the coffee maker. It was already broken. I know. That's why it feels rude. For one blessed second, Nathan laughed under his breath. Not because it was funny, because sometimes laughter was the last match in a cave. Rocky entered low, nose working. He moved through the room with astonishing discipline, not sniffing randomly, but reading the air in lines and layers. His paws stepped around scattered papers. He paused near the door frame where the device had been placed, then moved to the trunk, then the bedroom window. A low growl rose in his chest. Nathan crouched. "What do you have, boy?" Rocky turned toward the bathroom. Frank moved first, weapon drawn but low. Daniel followed. Nathan signaled Emma to stay back. She did not listen completely, but she did stay behind him. The bathroom window was cracked open. On the sill clung a torn strip of dark fabric. Rocky stood on his hind legs, sniffed it, then barked once. Nathan used tweezers from Daniel's kit to lift the fabric into an evidence sleeve. Dark gray cloth. Heavy weave. Not from Emma's apartment. Luis appeared from the hallway holding a tablet. "Got the lobby footage." Daniel took it. The video was grainy but clear enough. At 7:36 a.m., a man entered wearing a dark cap, gray jacket, and work gloves. He kept his face angled away from the camera, but for 2 seconds he looked toward the stairs. Emma felt Nathan go still. Daniel paused the image. The man was middle-aged, maybe 45, with a square face, close-set eyes, and a small scar or crease near his mouth. His hair, visible beneath the cap, was dark with gray at the sides. He moved like someone trained to avoid cameras, but not like a common burglar. No wasted motion. No nervous glance. Purposeful. Owen, connected remotely on Daniel's secure line, spoke through the tablet. "Run facial comparison?" Daniel said, "Do it locally. No open networks." Luis transferred the still image to Owen's air-gapped machine through a secure device. They waited in Emma's destroyed apartment while Rocky continued to smell the torn fabric as if memorizing an enemy's name. 5 minutes later, Owen called back. "I have a probable ID," he said. "Not current military. Former Department of Defense civilian security contractor. Name, Warren Pike." Daniel frowned. "Any relation?" "No," Owen said quickly. "And I resent sharing a surname with crime." Details. Warren Pike, 47. Formerly attached to Defense Facilities Protective Liaison Office. Terminated 3 years ago after an internal misconduct review that was sealed. Before that, he worked contract security for classified hearings and evidence transport. Nathan's eyes narrowed. Evidence transport. Daniel looked at Emma. "A man trained around sensitive records just broke into your apartment." Emma stared at the paused image of Warren Pike. "He did not find what he wanted," she said. "No," Daniel replied. "But he may now know you moved it." Rocky suddenly pulled toward the hallway, sharp and urgent. Nathan grabbed his harness. "Rocky." The dog strained once, then stopped, trembling with focus. Frank stepped into the hallway and looked down the stairs. Someone was here. Daniel moved to the door. A black pickup was pulling away from the curb outside. Luis ran to the window. No plate visible. Mud covered. Rocky barked, deep and furious, and lunged toward the stairs. Nathan released him only enough to reach the lobby, not outside. But as they descended, the building's side door slammed. Rocky surged forward and caught something at the threshold. A sleeve. Someone shouted outside. A man's voice, pained. The pickup engine roared. By the time Frank reached the sidewalk, the truck was gone. Rocky stood in the open doorway with a torn piece of dark jacket clenched in his teeth. His amber eyes were bright, his breathing heavy, and a low rumble still vibrated in his chest. There was a smear of blood on the fabric. Nathan took it gently. "Good boy." Emma knelt beside Rocky before thinking. She touched the side of his neck. "Good boy," she whispered. Rocky leaned into her just slightly. Daniel looked at the torn sleeve, then at the road where the truck had vanished. "Now we have blood." The investigation changed shape by afternoon. Daniel no longer called it witness intimidation. He used colder words now. Coordinated obstruction. Evidence suppression. Possible homicide. Interstate conspiracy. Words that sounded dry until Emma understood each one was a door into a deeper room. They relocated to a secure rental cabin outside Cedar Ridge, arranged through Frank. The cabin belonged to Frank's cousin, a retired park ranger named Judith Mercer, who appeared only long enough to hand over keys and a casserole. Judith was a wiry woman in her late 60s with white hair and a braid, sun-browned skin, and the calm distrust of anyone who had spent decades dealing with tourists, bears, and government forms. She asked no questions, looked at Rocky, and said, "Dog gets the good blanket." Then she left. By evening, Owen had recovered partial data from Emma's damaged flash drive. The cabin's living room became a war room. Daniel sat at the table with his laptop. Nathan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Emma stood near the fireplace, Rocky at her feet. Frank watched the windows. Luis checked the driveway every 10 minutes. Owen's face appeared on a secure video call, lit blue by screens. I found deleted report fragments, he said. Not full documents, but enough metadata to matter. Emma's medical risk objections were entered into the operational archive. They were later removed from the visible record. Emma's fingers tightened around her mug. Daniel leaned forward. By whom? Removal request came through administrative authority attached to Langford's command office. But the actual deletion was executed by a records technician using elevated credentials. Name? Owen hesitated. Daniel's expression sharpened. Owen. Records technician was listed as Nora Pelham. Emma frowned. I don't know that name. Owen swallowed. That is because she died 4 years ago. The room went very still. Nathan pushed off the wall. Someone used a dead woman's credentials. Yes, Owen said. And not once. Her credentials accessed 6 files connected to the names on Nathan's list. Emma's file included. Daniel removed his glasses slowly. Emma felt the old coal under ash glow hotter. This was no longer about a misunderstood battlefield decision. No longer about a bitter commander punishing one disobedient medic. This was machinery. Someone had built a machine to erase people. Daniel's phone rang again near dusk. He answered, listened, then looked at Emma. The crash report on Caleb is inconsistent, he said after ending the call. Brake lines were cut, cleanly, before impact. Emma closed her eyes. Caleb Rourke, who had tried to speak, had been murdered before she could ever hear his voice. For a moment, grief and rage stood inside her like twin animals, each waiting for permission to tear something apart. When she opened her eyes, Nathan was watching her. Not with pity. Pity would have insulted her. He watched her like someone standing beside a soldier who had just been given the truth of the battlefield. Daniel's voice was quiet. Miss Bennett, I need to ask clearly. Do you still wish to cooperate? Rocky lifted his head. Emma looked at the documents on the table. Her field log. Caleb's files. The image of Warren Pike. The torn, bloody sleeve sealed in evidence. The recovered metadata showing her reports had been deleted using the credentials of a dead woman. She thought of her apartment torn open. Daniel Whitaker alive in surgery. Lynette Harrow saying the hospital had to protect itself. Langford's cold blue eyes from memory. Nathan's brother Eli. Dead on a road he should never have been ordered to take. Caleb Rourke, killed before he could testify. For years, Emma had believed survival meant staying small. Now she understood something different. Staying small had not protected her. It had only made her easier to bury. Yes, she said. Daniel nodded once. Then this preliminary inquiry becomes a formal federal conspiracy investigation tonight. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent over the dark pines. Inside the cabin, Rocky rose and moved to the window. His reflection stood beside Emma's in the glass, a forgotten nurse and an old war dog, both pulled back into a battle that had never truly ended. And somewhere beyond the trees, the people who had erased records, murdered witnesses, and hunted the truth were learning the same thing Emma had finally remembered. Some things buried deep enough do not die. They wait. Snow fell through the night outside Judith Mercer's cabin, soft as ash from a fire no one could see. By morning, the pine trees stood heavy and white, and the world beyond the windows looked innocent in the cruel way winter sometimes did, covering tracks while pretending nothing had happened. Inside, no one had slept properly. Emma Bennett sat at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that Frank Mercer had made strong enough to qualify as a legal stimulant. Rocky lay at her feet, his head resting across his paws, but his eyes were open. Nathan Cole stood near the window, one shoulder against the wall, watching the tree line with the patience of a man who knew danger did not always arrive loudly. Daniel Brooks had claimed the table as if it were a battlefield map. Evidence bags, printed stills, recovered file fragments, and Owen Pike's latest reports lay in careful rows before him. The cabin smelled of coffee, old wood, damp wool, and the faint metallic odor of nervous people trying not to show they were nervous. Emma had spent enough years around soldiers, surgeons, and grieving families to know that fear had many costumes. Frank's fear became silence. Luis Ortega's became motion, checking locks and windows every 20 minutes. Owens came through the secure video line as jokes so bad they deserved medical attention. Daniel's fear became order. Nathan's became stillness. Emma's became clarity, the cold, bright kind that entered her chest when the world narrowed to one question. What must be done next? Owen's face glowed on the laptop screen, pale and freckled beneath messy red hair, his round glasses reflecting lines of recovered data. He had not slept either. There were shadows under his eyes, and his fingerless gloves had been replaced by an old gray hoodie with a cartoon raccoon on it, which made him look even younger than 27 and somehow more brilliant. I finished comparing the deleted archive fragments from Emma's flash drive with Caleb Rourke's partial transfer, Owen said. And before anyone asks, yes, I checked it twice, then checked whether I was hallucinating, then checked it a third time because my therapist says I should respect uncertainty, but she has never met corrupted military metadata. Frank, standing near the back door, muttered, "That boy needs outdoor hobbies." Daniel did not look amused. "Say it plainly." Owen swallowed. Victor Langford did not initiate the first suppression request. Emma looked up. Nathan turned from the window. Daniel went very still. "Explain." The first request to alter the Iron Falcon communications archive was routed through Langford's command authority, but the original authorization marker does not belong to Langford. It belongs to a policy access node above him. Civilian National Security Channel. Very high clearance. The name attached to the authorization is Elliot Graves. The cabin seemed to shrink around the name. Daniel removed his glasses. He did that whenever information became dangerous enough to deserve being seen without glass between him and the world. Nathan's voice was quiet. "You're sure?" Owen nodded. "I wish I wasn't." Elliot Graves. National Security Advisor. Current. Active. Terrifying haircut. Face like a museum statue that disapproves of soup. No one laughed. Emma knew the name. Everyone who had watched television in the last 5 years knew Elliot Graves. He was the kind of man news anchors called brilliant with a tone that suggested brilliant and dangerous had become neighbors. He was in his early 60s, tall and thin, with silver-white hair combed perfectly back from a long, narrow face. His skin had a polished, bloodless quality, and his eyes were pale gray, almost colorless under heavy brows. He wore dark suits that looked less tailored than engineered. In public, he spoke softly, never wasting words, never raising his voice, never appearing angry. That was what made him frightening. Angry men could be dismissed as emotional. Elliot Graves looked like reason itself had learned how to sharpen a knife. Daniel leaned forward. Graves was in government during Iron Falcon? Deputy Director in a Defense Policy Office, Owen said. Unofficial liaison to several covert logistics programs. Not command, not military chain, but close enough to whisper into rooms where orders were born. Nathan's jaw tightened. Langford was not the top. No, Daniel said. Langford was the hand that signed. Graves may have been the mind that aimed. Emma stared at the scattered files. For years, Victor Langford had been the summit of the mountain in her memory. The cold, blue-eyed commander whose channel had sent 12 people toward death and then buried her for refusing. Now the summit had moved higher. Behind Langford stood another figure, not in uniform, not on the battlefield, not accountable to the dead in any language soldiers understood. What did Graves want? Emma asked. Owen clicked to another file. That's where it gets worse, because apparently this case looked around and decided being awful was not enough. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Owen, right? Sorry. Owen inhaled. There are recurring references in Caleb's fuel logs to shipments coded as agricultural machinery. But the weight, routing, security escorts, and destination records do not match machinery. They match weapons transfer protocols. Frank looked over. Illegal weapons? Owen nodded. Small arms, communications hardware, possibly anti-armor systems. The goods moved through civilian subcontractors, then disappeared into unofficial channels. Iron Falcon's route intersected one of those movements. Emma felt the old, cold slide down her spine. A memory stirred. Not the one she had already told them. Not the route. Not the missing children. Something smaller. A fragment she had buried because it had never fit cleanly into the official nightmare. Nathan saw her face change. Emma. She stood slowly. During Iron Falcon, after she redirected her convoy, there had been a burst of encrypted traffic on a channel her medical console should not have received. At the time, she thought it was spillover from a command relay. The encryption had been outdated, mismatched to newer field hardware. She had caught only seconds of it before the channel corrected itself. A voice. Male. Calm. American. The phrase returned now like a hand rising from dark water. Route exposure acceptable. Cargo priority remains primary. Local losses manageable. Emma's mug slipped slightly in her hands. Coffee spilled over her fingers, hot enough to burn, but she barely felt it. Emma, Nathan said again. She looked at Daniel. There was a signal. Daniel rose. What signal? I didn't include it in the first account because I thought. She stopped. Because saying it aloud even now made her sound like a woman reaching for ghosts. I intercepted part of an encrypted transmission during Iron Falcon. It was not meant for my unit. The protocol was outdated, and for maybe 6 or 7 seconds, it bled into our medical command receiver. Daniel reached for the recorder, but did not turn it on yet. Exact words. Emma closed her eyes. Not to remember. To survive remembering. Route exposure acceptable. Cargo priority remains primary. Local losses manageable. Silence followed. Outside, snow slid from a branch and struck the ground with a soft thud. Nathan's face had gone pale beneath the weathered tan of his skin. Daniel turned on the recorder. Repeat that. She did. Voice. Male. Older. Calm. Not Langford. I knew Langford's voice. Could it have been Graves? I didn't know Graves then. Daniel looked to Owen. Can we search archived audio? Owen's face had lost its nervous brightness. If it exists, yes. But if Graves was involved, the official archive will be scrubbed. Backups? Maybe. Communications spillover sometimes gets cached in diagnostic logs. Nobody checks those unless equipment fails. Emma looked at him. Our receiver failed twice that week. Owen's eyes widened. That is either terrible luck or a gift from the patron saint of bad wiring. Daniel started gathering papers. We present to Senate staff tomorrow. This changes the brief. Nathan looked sharply at him. You're taking Graves' name to the Senate? I'm taking documented evidence that Langford's suppression chain leads above him. I will not accuse the National Security Advisor of illegal weapons trafficking without authenticated audio, but I can show enough to suspend Langford's confirmation and force protected review. Emma heard what he did not say. If they moved too soon, Graves would vanish behind classification, privilege, and polished statements. If they moved too slowly, more people might die. At 11:17 a.m., Daniel's secure phone rang. He answered. His expression changed before he spoke. What system? He asked. Owen straightened on the laptop. Daniel listened, then said, Is the evidence vault isolated? A pause. Shut it down physically. Pull power if you have to. Do not wait for authorization. He ended the call. Owen's voice came thin through the speaker. Please tell me that was about a normal office printer fire. Daniel looked at the room. The government evidence storage system tied to the preliminary inquiry has been breached. Nathan stepped forward. Our files. Some are mirrored locally. Some were in transfer queue. The attack hit the authentication layer and document index. They are not just stealing files. They are making files disappear. Owen began typing so fast his hands blurred. I'm checking the secure drop. Give me 20 seconds. Daniel said, You have 10. That is emotionally unsupportive. 8. Emma felt Rocky rise beside her. The dog did not understand cyber attacks, but he understood the temperature of human fear. His ears angled forward. His body turned toward the cabin door. Owen cursed. Not his usual muttered nonsense. A real curse, flat and scared. What? Daniel demanded. Evidence index is being rewritten. Emma's submission exists, then vanishes, then reappears under a different case number. Caleb's files are gone from the visible queue. The backup hashes are changing. Can you stop it? Not from here. Daniel's voice dropped. Can you preserve a copy? Owen looked away from the screen for the first time. Maybe, but there's a mirror server. Daniel frowned. What mirror server? I found references in Caleb's transfer. He didn't send everything to the official drop. He duplicated data to an old subcontractor backup system. Not government-owned. Off books. Nathan's eyes narrowed. Where? Owen typed. Cedar Ridge Industrial District. Warehouse registered to Northline Agricultural Supply. Emma's pulse changed. Agricultural machinery. Weapons shipments disguised as farm equipment. Daniel understood at the same instant. That warehouse is part of the old logistics chain. And Caleb knew, Emma said. Owen nodded. He may have hidden the backup where the original sin happened. Frank moved from the door. Could be a trap. Daniel looked at him. Likely. Nathan checked his weapon under his jacket. Could also be the only surviving copy. Rocky gave a low whine, then moved to the window facing the road. Everyone noticed. Luis, who had been posted outside, opened the cabin door and stepped in quickly. Black SUV at the lower bend. Stopped for maybe 10 seconds, then kept going. Daniel's face hardened. We move now. Northline Agricultural Supply occupied a corrugated metal warehouse behind a chain-link fence topped with sagging barbed wire. The sign was faded green and white, with a painted wheat stalk peeling at the edges. The front office windows were dark. A loading dock sat along the west side, its bay doors closed. Beyond the building, old pallets and rusted equipment lay half-buried in snow. Daniel parked 2 blocks away behind an abandoned tire shop. Frank and Luis approached first on foot. Nathan stayed with Emma near the alley, Rocky between them, nose lifted to the wind. Owen remained remote, guiding them through an earpiece Daniel wore, his voice low and tense. Property records show Northline closed 6 years ago, Owen said. But power usage never dropped to 0. Someone has been keeping systems running inside. Daniel looked at Emma. You stay behind me. I am very tired of that sentence. I am very committed to it. Nathan's mouth twitched despite the tension. You two can argue after we survive. Rocky suddenly lowered his head and pulled toward the fence line. Nathan let the leash slide through his hand, giving the dog room. Rocky moved along the fence, sniffing near the snow, then stopped by a drainage gap half hidden behind a collapsed pallet. He pawed once, then looked back. Frank crouched. There's a cut in the fence behind the pallet. Fresh. Luis examined the snow. Multiple footprints. Recent. Maybe 2 hours. Daniel's voice was grim. We are not first. They entered through the cut. Inside the warehouse, cold swallowed sound. Rows of old agricultural equipment stood under plastic tarps. Seed drills, cracked sprayer tanks, tractor parts, rusted conveyor belts. Dust hung in the air, glittering in flashlight beams. Somewhere deep in the building, machinery hummed softly. Rocky led them past the main storage floor toward a back office. He moved slowly, not in fear, but in concentration. At a metal door marked electrical, he stopped and sat. Nathan whispered, "This is it." Frank opened the door with tools from his kit. Behind it, instead of an electrical closet, a stairwell descended beneath the warehouse. Emma looked down into the dark. Because of course the abandoned farm warehouse has a basement. Nathan gave her a sidelong glance. You joke when you're scared. I also joke when I'm annoyed. There is overlap. Daniel went first. Frank followed. Emma came behind Nathan, with Rocky pressing close to her knee as they descended. The basement was not abandoned. It was clean, climate-controlled, and filled with server racks humming behind locked mesh cabinets. Blue and green lights blinked in neat rows. Cables ran overhead like black vines. A workstation sat against one wall with 3 monitors, sleeping dark. Owen's voice rose in Daniel's earpiece, audible in the quiet. If you see servers, do not touch random things. I repeat, do not let anyone solve technology with masculine confidence. Frank muttered, I miss when crimes used paper. Daniel approached the workstation. Owen, walk me through imaging. As Daniel connected a secure drive, Emma moved slowly along the racks. She did not understand servers, but she understood hidden rooms. She understood the arrogance of powerful people who believed anything underground belonged to them. On one rack, a label had been scratched but not fully removed. IF Cargo Route Archive. Iron Falcon. Cargo. Her breath caught. Nathan. He came to her side, saw the label, and his face darkened. Before either could speak, Owen shouted through the line. Daniel, stop. Someone else is connected. Daniel froze. Remote user? Yes. Active session. They're watching the server. They know you're there. The basement lights went out. For 1 second, darkness consumed everything. Then red emergency lights flickered on. Rocky snarled. Gunfire erupted from above. The sound in the stairwell was enormous, a thunder trapped in concrete. Frank shoved Daniel behind a server rack. Luis returned fire from the base of the stairs. Nathan grabbed Emma and pulled her behind a steel cabinet as bullets sparked against the doorframe. Stay down, Nathan shouted. Emma hit the floor hard, shoulders slamming concrete. Rocky pressed over her, body low, teeth bared toward the stairs. The dog's growl vibrated against her ribs. More shots. Frank shouted something. Luis cursed in Spanish. Daniel was on the floor, one hand clamped over the secure drive still connected to the workstation as if it were a wounded child he refused to abandon. Nathan rose, fired twice, then ducked as rounds punched into the server cabinet. Emma smelled hot metal, dust, and the old, terrible scent of violence blooming indoors. A flashbang clattered down the stairs. Nathan saw it before anyone else. He moved, not away, toward Emma. He threw himself over her and Rocky, twisting his body between them and the device as it detonated. White light. Sound vanished into a ringing void. Emma's world shattered into fragments. Rocky's weight, concrete under her palms. Nathan's jacket against her face. The taste of blood where she had bitten her tongue. Red lights pulsing like a dying heartbeat. When hearing returned, it came with shouting. Frank's voice. Nathan. Emma pushed up. Nathan lay half across her legs, face gray, jaw clenched. Blood spread dark beneath his right side, soaking through the field jacket. No, Emma whispered. Rocky whined, high and sharp, nosing Nathan's shoulder. Nathan tried to speak. Only air came out. Emma's training took over before panic could. She pressed her hands against the wound. Entry right flank. Possible abdominal involvement. Frank, I need pressure dressing. Luis, cover the stairs. Daniel, tell Owen to keep copying whatever he can and call medical extraction now. Daniel stared for half a heartbeat, then moved. Nathan's eyes found hers. Even in pain, there was apology there, which made her angry enough to keep from breaking. Do not, she said, pressing harder. Do not look at me like that. His mouth twitched weakly. Bossy, you threw yourself on a flashbang. You've lost the right to commentary. Rocky stayed pressed beside Nathan's head, trembling but obedient when Emma snapped. Rocky down. The dog lowered himself, eyes fixed on Nathan, a soldier at the side of a fallen handler. Above them, footsteps retreated. The attackers were leaving. They had not come to win a gunfight. They had come to stop the copy or kill the witnesses. Maybe both. Owen's voice cracked through the speaker. Copy complete. Daniel, pull the drive. Pull it now. Daniel yanked the drive free. Frank moved to Nathan's other side with medical supplies. His big hands were careful, almost tender. Emma worked fast. Pressure. Airway. Pulse. Skin. Breathing. Her old world narrowed to the holy arithmetic of survival. Blood loss. Time. Distance. Choices. Nathan's eyelids fluttered. Stay with me, she said. His eyes opened slightly. Rocky, he breathed. Emma glanced at the dog. He's here. Nathan's hand moved weakly. Rocky pressed his muzzle beneath it. For one moment, in the red-lit basement beneath an abandoned warehouse filled with buried crimes, the war became very small. One wounded man, one loyal dog, one woman refusing to let another life be taken by the same darkness. Daniel crouched beside Emma. Extraction is 12 minutes out. Emma did not look up. Make it 8. I don't control helicopters. Then start praying aggressively. Frank gave a short, startled laugh that broke almost immediately into silence. Nathan's pulse was weak but present. Emma held pressure and leaned close. You protected me, she said. Now let me do my job. Outside, sirens began in the distance. Inside the server room, Daniel held the secure drive in one hand, his face grim with the knowledge of what they had found and what it had cost. Owen's remote copy had preserved the backup before the attackers could destroy it. The hidden servers linked Iron Falcon to illegal weapons transfers. Elliot Graves' name sat above Victor Langford's in the authorization chain. The truth had survived, but Nathan's blood was on Emma's hands. Rocky gave one low, broken sound and laid his head against Nathan's chest. Emma pressed harder against the wound, refusing to surrender him to the cold. The people behind Iron Falcon had erased records, murdered Caleb Rourke, invaded her home, and sent armed men into the dark to bury the last copy of the truth. They had not counted on Rocky. They had not counted on Nathan. And they had made the oldest mistake powerful cowards always made. They had mistaken a wounded woman for a defeated one. Nathan Cole was still breathing when the medical helicopter lifted out of the industrial district, and for Emma Bennett, that was the only fact in the world large enough to hold on to. Not the hidden servers beneath Northline Agricultural Supply. Not the secure drive Daniel Brooks carried against his chest like a stolen flame from the gods. Not Elliot Graves, Victor Langford, or the dead men whose shadows had finally begun to move in the light. Just Nathan's breathing. Weak, uneven, present. The helicopter's rotors beat against the winter air as paramedics worked over him, their gloved hands moving with urgent discipline while Rocky stood restrained beside Emma, trembling so hard the leather of his harness creaked. The old German shepherd did not bark. He did not fight. He simply watched the helicopter disappear into the gray Montana sky, and the sound that came from his throat was not quite a whine, not quite a growl, but something older than both. It was grief learning patience. Emma stood in the snow with Nathan's blood drying on her hands. Her scrubs were stained dark beneath her coat. Her hair had come loose from its knot, brown strands stuck to her face by sweat and melted snow. She looked less like a nurse and more like someone who had walked out of a battlefield carrying the wrong century on her shoulders. Daniel Brooks approached her slowly. He had lost his glasses during the fight, and without them his face looked harsher, more tired, as if the lines carved into him had deepened in the basement. In one hand, he held the secure drive. In the other, his phone. "He's going to St. Helena Trauma Center in Billings," Daniel said. "Frank is riding with him." Emma nodded, though the words reached her as if through water. St. Helena. Trauma. Frank. She understood them individually. Together, they became only one question. Would Nathan live? Daniel studied her. "Miss Bennett." She looked at him. "I need you with me." That almost made her laugh. The absurdity of it. She had blood on her hands, no job, no apartment worth returning to, a murdered witness behind her, a wounded man in the sky ahead of her, and now the federal government needed her presence like one more document in a file. "Nathan needs me," she said. "Nathan needs surgeons," Daniel replied. His voice was not unkind. That made it harder. "The evidence needs a witness. The Senate staff director has moved the preliminary session forward. They know there was an attack. They know we recovered data. If we do not get this drive into protected custody before Graves, people can challenge the chain. Everything Nathan just bled for becomes vulnerable." Rocky pulled toward the direction the helicopter had gone. Emma placed her hand on his head, and the dog stilled under her touch. That was when she understood the cruelty of the choice. Love wanted to follow the wounded. Duty wanted to guard the truth. And somewhere between them, her old self, the staff sergeant they had tried to bury, rose from the ash and stood straight. "When?" she asked. "Tonight," Daniel said. "Secure transport to Washington leaves in 90 minutes from a private airfield outside Bozeman. You, me, Owen remotely, Luis, and the drive. Nathan will be under guard at St. Helena. Frank will not leave him. Rocky can come with you or stay with Nathan." Rocky looked up at Emma. "Not Nathan." Emma swallowed. "He comes with me," she said quietly. Daniel nodded once, as if he had expected no other answer. The private airfield outside Bozeman was little more than a strip of black pavement cut into snow-covered land. By the time they arrived, dusk had folded itself over Montana. A federal jet waited near a hangar, its windows dark, its engines humming low. Luis Ortega stood near the stairs with a rifle beneath his coat and a bruise forming along his cheek from the warehouse fight. He looked younger in the fading light, but no less alert. His quiet manners had survived the ambush, though his eyes kept moving from fence line to runway to Emma, as if counting all the ways the world could betray them before takeoff. Daniel introduced the woman waiting at the aircraft door as Special Agent Rebecca Shaw. She was in her early 40s, tall and athletic, with deep brown skin, close-cropped natural hair, and a scar under her chin that looked old enough to have become part of her expression. Her eyes were sharp, but not hard. Emma noticed the difference. Sharp meant she saw danger. Hard meant she enjoyed seeing it. Rebecca wore a black coat and carried herself with the grounded confidence of someone who had spent years entering rooms where no one wanted her to ask questions. "Miss Bennett," she said, offering her hand. "I'm with the Senate Armed Services Committee's Investigative Council, temporarily detailed from federal service. I've read your preliminary account." Emma shook her hand. "Then you know more about my life than most people who have bought me coffee." Rebecca's mouth twitched. "After tonight, a lot of people may pretend they always believed you. I'm not looking forward to that. No honest person would." Rocky climbed the aircraft steps before Emma did, turned at the top, and waited. Rebecca looked at him. "That Rocky?" "Yes. He has better instincts than half the people in Washington." Daniel said, "Only half." Rebecca's expression remained sober. "I was being generous." The flight east felt unreal. Emma sat by a small window with Rocky stretched across the floor at her feet. Daniel sat across from her, the secure drive locked inside a hard case cuffed to his wrist. Rebecca reviewed printed summaries. Luis dozed for exactly 12 minutes, then woke with a start and looked embarrassed, as if sleep had been an unprofessional indulgence. Outside the window, the country passed beneath them unseen, black land and scattered lights, a nation sleeping while one of its buried sins was carried toward its capital. Emma did not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Nathan falling over her in red emergency light. She felt the impact of the flashbang, heard Rocky's broken sound, smelled blood and hot metal. Her hands flexed in her lap as if searching for pressure against a wound. At 11:42 p.m. Eastern Time, Daniel's phone received an encrypted update from Frank. Nathan out of surgery. Critical, but stable. Bullet removed. Internal bleeding controlled. He asked for Rocky before anesthesia fully took him. Stubborn idiot. Emma read the message 3 times. Then she bowed her head and covered her eyes with one hand. She did not cry. Not fully. But something inside her unclenched enough to hurt. Rocky lifted his head. He's alive, she whispered. The dog stood, pressed his muzzle into her knee, and released a long breath as if he had understood every word. Washington, D.C. greeted them before sunrise with cold rain and lights smeared across wet pavement. The city looked carved from stone and secrecy. Emma had seen photographs of the Capitol before, of course. Everyone had. But seeing its dome rise pale against the early morning sky, while she rode in a black vehicle with federal plates and a war dog beside her felt like entering the mouth of history. Some cities welcomed people. Washington measured them. The secure facility was not the Capitol itself, but an annex several blocks away, used for classified briefings. Inside, the air smelled of polished floors, old paper, and expensive coffee. Men and women moved through corridors with badges hanging from their necks and faces arranged into expressions of professional urgency. Emma felt their eyes touch her blood-stained jacket before sliding away. She knew what she looked like. A nurse dragged from a battlefield into marble halls. A woman who had been erased arriving with the eraser's own handwriting. Rebecca led them into a holding room with no windows. There, Emma met Senator Margaret Hale. Senator Hale was 68, tall for a woman of her generation, with white hair cut in a severe bob and a face that looked as if it had been weathered by prairie wind and committee hearings in equal measure. Her skin was fair and lined, her eyes a clear blue that missed very little. She wore a navy suit without ornament except for a small silver pin shaped like wheat, a reminder of her home state of Kansas. Her handshake was dry, firm, and brief. Hale had the manner of a school principal who had once been kind, then watched too many children lied to by adults. "Miss Bennett," she said, "I am sorry it took bloodshed to get you into this building." Emma looked at her. "I am sorry it took this building so long to notice." Daniel went very still. Rebecca looked down as if hiding a smile. Senator Hale did not smile, but something like approval passed through her eyes. "Good. Save that honesty. You'll need it." Another senator entered behind her, Senator Marcus Bell of Virginia, a black man in his late 50s with a broad build, close-shaved head, and a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard. Unlike Hale, Bell carried warmth openly, but it did not soften him. He had served 23 years in the Army before entering politics, and it showed in the way he stood, feet planted, shoulders squared, hands still. "Staff Sergeant Bennett," he said, using the title deliberately. "I read the first summary. I want you to know something before this starts. Some people in that room will try to make this about your character instead of their documents. Don't chase them. Documents don't panic. Let them speak." Emma nodded. "I can do that." Bell looked at Rocky. "And this is the famous dog." Rocky stared at him with solemn judgment. Bell lowered his voice. "I've faced easier confirmation panels." For the first time that morning, Emma smiled. The hearing began in a secure chamber below the public committee rooms. It was not televised. Not yet. Around the long table sat Senate staff, legal counsel, military liaisons, and several officials whose names Emma did not know. At the far end sat Lieutenant General Victor Langford. Seeing him in person after all those years did not feel like lightning. It felt worse. Ordinary. He was older now, his once silver hair fully white, his uniform immaculate, ribbons aligned with surgical precision. He was tall, straight-backed, handsome in the way statues were handsome when no one remembered what cruelty they commemorated. His blue eyes moved to Emma, paused, and revealed nothing. Beside him sat a civilian attorney named Caroline Vance, a woman in her 50s with auburn hair swept into a flawless twist, pearl earrings, and a face so composed it seemed professionally manufactured. Her posture was elegant, her smile minimal, and her eyes were quick in a predatory way. She looked like someone who could apologize while removing the floor beneath your feet. She had represented defense officials through scandals before, Rebecca whispered, and had a talent for making victims sound inconvenient. Daniel presented first. His voice filled the room without rising. He described the recovered Iron Falcon files, the deleted reports, the use of dead technician Nora Pelham's credentials, Caleb Rourke's death, the cyber attack on the evidence system, and the recovered mirror server. He did not speculate. He stacked facts. Each fact landed like stone. Then Owen appeared by secure video from an undisclosed technical site. His red hair was messier than ever, but when he spoke, the nervous young man vanished. In his place stood a technician of frightening precision. He explained metadata chains, deletion logs, false credentials, archive hashes, and server backups in language simple enough for politicians and sharp enough for prosecutors. When Caroline Vance tried to suggest the data could have been manipulated by Daniel's team, Owen blinked at her through the screen and said, "Ma'am, with respect, that would require us to forge a deletion trail across 3 independent systems, 2 of which were offline before we knew they existed, while also resurrecting a dead woman's credentials retroactively. I can barely keep my printer online. So no." Senator Bell coughed into his hand. Emma did not smile this time, but she wanted to. Then Daniel played the first communication record. The room changed. Emma heard her own younger voice, clipped and controlled through static. Medical element 2 objecting to assigned route. Civilian displacement pattern and signal absence indicate elevated casualty probability. Request delay or alternate route authorization. Then Major Ellis Crane's voice, thin and dismissive. Objection noted and denied. Proceed as ordered. Then Emma again, unable to comply under medical risk authority. Diverting element 2 to alternate irrigation route. Logging deviation. The recording ended. For 5 seconds, no one spoke. Victor Langford's face remained still, but Emma saw his right hand tighten once on the table. Senator Hale leaned forward. "General Langford, were you aware this objection existed?" Langford's voice was smooth, disciplined, almost sorrowful. "Senator, operational environments are complex. I cannot speak to every field-level exchange from nearly a decade ago without full context." Daniel placed another document on the screen. This is the record pull authorization 18 days after Iron Falcon. It removed Staff Sergeant Bennett's objection from the visible archive. The request originated under your command authority. Langford did not blink. Administrative cleanup after combat operations is routine. Emma felt Rocky shift beside her chair. He was allowed in the room under service animal security exception, though everyone understood he was less service animal than silent witness. Daniel clicked to the next file. Administrative cleanup using the credentials of a deceased records technician is not routine. That time, Langford's attorney spoke. "My client cannot be expected to verify technical irregularities in archival systems managed by civilian offices." "Civilian offices connected to Elliot Graves," Senator Hale said. The room went still again. Langford's eyes moved to Hale. There. For the first time, Emma saw it. Not fear. Awareness. The name had struck something. Daniel did not look at Langford. He looked at the committee. "We also recovered a diagnostic audio fragment from a medical command receiver cache. The fragment corresponds to the Iron Falcon operational window. It was not part of the main communications archive. That is likely why it survived." Emma's pulse climbed. Rebecca's hand rested lightly on the back of Emma's chair, not touching her, but near enough to steady if needed. Daniel played the recovered fragment. Static. A clipped burst of encryption noise. Then a male voice, older, calm, clear enough to freeze the blood of every honest person in the room. "Route exposure acceptable. Cargo priority remains primary. Local losses manageable." The audio ended. No one breathed. Emma stared at the table. Hearing it outside her own memory was almost unbearable. For years, That voice had lived inside her like a ghost she could not prove was real. Now the ghost had entered the room and spoken through federal speakers. Senator Bell's voice was low. "Do we have voice identification?" Daniel answered carefully. "Preliminary comparison indicates a strong match to Elliot Graves during the period when he served as Deputy Director in Defense Policy Operations. Full forensic confirmation is underway." Caroline Vance stood. "This is outrageous." A partial audio fragment, presented without full authentication, used to imply criminal conduct by a sitting national security advisor. The chamber door opened. Everyone turned. An older man stood in the doorway holding a sealed document case. He was thin, almost fragile, with stooped shoulders, a deeply lined face, and sparse white hair combed carefully to one side. His suit was old but clean. His hands trembled, though not from age alone. His eyes were watery gray, and beneath the fear in them lived the exhausted relief of a man who had carried a stone too long and finally reached the river. Rebecca stepped toward him immediately, but Senator Hale raised a hand. "State your name," Hale said. The man swallowed. "Arthur Pell, former Deputy Records Administrator, Department of Defense Policy Office." Daniel's face sharpened. Arthur Pell looked at Emma then, and the guilt in his expression was so naked she almost looked away. "I helped process the Iron Falcon archive alteration," he said, "and I have the final authorization documents." The sealed case shook in his hands. Victor Langford stood so abruptly his chair struck the wall behind him. Arthur flinched, but did not run. Senator Hale's voice cut through the room like a blade. "General Langford, sit down." For one wild moment, Emma thought he would refuse. Then Victor Langford, the man who had once signed away her name as if she were nothing more than an inconvenient line in a report, sat back down under the eyes of the country's law. Arthur Pell walked forward, and the last locked door began to open. Arthur Pell placed the sealed case on the hearing table with both hands, as if he were laying down a coffin small enough to carry. For a moment no one moved. The room, so full of power, titles, polished shoes, and guarded faces, became strangely humble before that battered black case. Emma Bennett watched the old man's fingers tremble against the latch. His hands were thin, blue-veined, marked by age spots and the soft ruin of years spent behind desks where consequences arrived in other people's lives. Yet in those hands, at last, rested the thing powerful men feared more than anger, more than grief, more than accusation. Proof. Senator Margaret Hale leaned forward. "Mr. Pell, are you here voluntarily?" Arthur swallowed. "Yes, Senator." "Do you understand that anything you say may be referred for criminal investigation?" "I do." "And you still wish to proceed?" Arthur looked at Emma. His eyes filled, but his voice steadied. "I should have proceeded 9 years ago." Caroline Vance stood again, her polished calm cracking at the edges. "Senator, this is highly irregular. My client has not been given notice of this witness, nor has counsel had time to review whatever documents he claims to possess." Senator Marcus Bell did not raise his voice. "Counsel, your client had nearly a decade to enjoy the benefits of irregularity. Sit down." A low murmur passed through the room. Victor Langford's face remained controlled, but Emma saw the small betrayal of his left hand, 2 fingers tapping once against the table. He remembered Arthur Pell. He knew what might be inside that case. Rebecca Shaw opened the seal under committee procedure. Daniel Brooks watched every motion, recording chain of custody. Inside were printed authorization forms, handwritten routing notes, classified communication summaries, and a small silver data card sealed inside a clear sleeve. Arthur explained each item with the weary precision of a man who had rehearsed confession for years in silence. He had been Deputy Records Administrator in the Department of Defense Policy Office during Iron Falcon. He had received a request to alter visibility on communications records connected to the operation. The request came through Langford's command office, but the clearance override came from Elliot Graves. Arthur had known it was wrong. He had told himself it was above his authority. He had told himself national security required ugly housekeeping. He had told himself many things cowards tell themselves when courage costs too much. Then Daniel played the authenticated audio again. "Route exposure acceptable. Cargo priority remains primary. Local losses manageable." Arthur closed his eyes. "That was Graves," he said. "I heard him say those words in a briefing the next morning. Not through radio. In person. He said the field losses were unfortunate, but the cargo corridor had remained protected. Senator Hale's voice was ice. What cargo? Arthur opened a folder with shaking hands. Weapons systems moved through civilian agricultural supply channels. The shipment was never meant to appear in military logistics. Iron Falcon's original route exposed a rival militia movement near the transfer corridor. The convoy was used as cover. Emma felt the room tilt, not from surprise, but from the final shape of horror becoming visible. 12 soldiers had lived because she refused. Others had died because powerful men had turned human bodies into smoke over a hidden road. Langford finally spoke. This is a desperate fabrication by a frightened bureaucrat seeking immunity. Arthur looked at him, and for the first time his old shoulders straightened. No, General. This is the receipt. Rebecca inserted the silver data card into a secure reader. Owen Pike appeared again on the monitor, hair wild, eyes enormous behind his glasses. I have hash confirmation, he said after a breathless minute. These records match the recovered server fragments. Authorization chain confirmed. Graves to Policy Channel. Policy Channel to Langford Command Office. Langford Command Office to Archive Suppression. Also, for the record, I would like everyone to know I am both horrified and technically impressed. No one laughed, but Senator Bell's mouth twitched. The hearing was suspended for 17 minutes while emergency referrals were prepared. Those 17 minutes stretched like a lifetime. Emma sat with Rocky's head against her knee. The dog had been silent throughout the proceeding, amber eyes fixed on Langford with a stillness that made even hardened staffers uneasy. Emma wondered whether Rocky remembered Nathan's brother, Eli, whether some scent of old grief lived in the same place dogs kept loyalty. Maybe humans needed archives because they forgot too easily. Dogs remembered with their whole bodies. When the committee reconvened, Senator Hale read the order aloud. Victor Langford's confirmation process was suspended pending formal investigation. The matter was referred to the Department of Justice, the Defense Criminal Investigative Service, and a special congressional review panel. Elliot Graves was to be subpoenaed for closed testimony and placed under immediate investigative hold regarding communications tied to Iron Falcon and related weapons transfers. Langford stood. Senator, you are making a grave mistake. Hale looked at him with the calm of a mountain, watching a storm waste itself. No, General. The mistake was believing buried things never rise. Federal officers entered through the side door. Langford's face changed then. Not much, but enough. The mask did not fall, it cracked. He looked at Emma for one sharp second, and she saw hatred there. Yes, but also disbelief. He had never imagined the woman he erased would return to watch him led away. Daniel Brooks stepped beside Emma as officers escorted Langford from the chamber. You did it, he said. Emma watched the door close. No, we did what Caleb died trying to do. What Nathan bled for. What Eli never got to see. Daniel accepted the correction. Then we make sure it holds. The next days moved like history running downhill. News broke first in careful language. Senior defense officials under investigation. Confirmation suspended. Classified logistics review opened. Then Arthur Pell's testimony leaked in fragments. Then Caleb Rourke's death was reclassified as homicide. Then the image of Emma Bennett walking into the Senate annex with Rocky at her side appeared on every major network, taken from a hallway camera by someone who clearly understood symbolism better than policy. Elliot Graves did not appear publicly for 2 days. When he finally did, he stood behind a podium with his silver hair perfect and his voice calm. He denied wrongdoing. He called the allegations politically motivated. He spoke of national security, complex operations, and the danger of judging past decisions without context. That evening, a federal subpoena arrived at his office. By dawn, he had resigned pending investigation. Victor Langford was arrested 46 hours after the hearing on charges including obstruction, conspiracy, evidence tampering, and making false official statements. More charges would follow. Others were named. Some retired overnight, as if leaving office could outrun guilt. Some lawyered up. Some began talking. That was how empires of silence fell, Daniel told Emma. Not all at once. First one stone shifted, then another. Then men who had mistaken fear for loyalty discovered fear had never loved them back. Nathan woke fully on the 3rd day. Emma was in his hospital room at St. Helena Trauma Center when he opened his eyes. Rocky had been allowed in after a nurse named Patricia Owens, a round-faced woman in her 60s with silver curls and the moral authority of a grandmother carrying a clipboard, declared that any administrator willing to argue with a wounded veteran's dog could come argue with her personally. No administrator appeared. Nathan's face was pale, his beard rougher, his right side bandaged beneath the blanket. He looked at Emma first, then Rocky. "Did we win?" he rasped. Emma sat beside him. Langford was arrested. Nathan blinked slowly. "Good. Graves resigned. Better. Rocky behaved in a Senate hearing better than most elected officials." Nathan's mouth curved weakly. "Expected." Rocky stood on his hind legs carefully, placing his front paws on the edge of the bed. Nathan lifted one shaking hand and touched his head. Emma looked away because some reunions deserve privacy, even when they happened in hospital rooms full of beeping machines. 2 weeks later, Emma received a letter from the Department of the Army. The language was stiff, official, and far too small for what it carried. Her discharge status was corrected. The disciplinary finding was vacated. Her record was amended to reflect that her actions during Iron Falcon had been consistent with lawful medical risk authority and had saved the lives of 12 service members. Her combat medical badge and commendations were formally restored. A separate review recommended public recognition. Emma read the letter 3 times at Nathan's kitchen table in Cedar Ridge. The new coffee maker gurgled behind her, because Nathan had bought one after hearing what happened to hers and claimed it was tactical infrastructure. Rocky slept beneath the table with his body touching both of their feet. Emma did cry then. Not loudly, not dramatically, just one hand over her mouth while the years finally found a door. Mountain View Regional Hospital issued its apology the following Monday. Lynette Harrow resigned before the press conference. Dr. Kevin Lal sent Emma a handwritten note admitting she had been right about Daniel Whitaker and that he hoped to become the kind of doctor who listened before pride killed someone. Emma respected the note more than she expected to. The interim hospital director, Dr. Helen Ward, met Emma in person. Helen was in her late 50s, short and sturdy, with warm brown eyes, steel gray hair cut close to her jaw, and the direct speech of someone who had spent 30 years cleaning up other people's disasters. She offered Emma the role of Director of Emergency Nursing and Clinical Response. Not as charity, not as apology alone. Because, Helen said, this hospital needs someone who can recognize danger before it becomes a body count. Emma asked for 24 hours. She took 6. Yes, she said. The public ceremony for Rocky happened in Cedar Ridge Veterans Hall 1 month after the hearing. The hall was packed. Nurses, veterans, federal agents, local families, reporters, and 12 surviving soldiers from Iron Falcon, older now, some limping, some gray, all alive. Senator Bell presented Rocky with a Civilian Valor Medal for protecting witnesses, detecting surveillance devices, locating hidden evidence, and assisting in a federal investigation. Rocky sat through the speech with noble patience until someone in the third row opened a bag of beef jerky. Then his ears betrayed him. The audience laughed, and the laughter did not cheapen the moment. It saved it from becoming too heavy to bear. Nathan stood with a cane, stubbornly refusing a wheelchair. Emma stood beside him in a dark blue dress she had borrowed from Grace Miller, because Grace had insisted that vindicated women should not attend ceremonies looking like they came to unclog a sink. When Rocky's medal was fastened to his harness, he looked first at Nathan, then at Emma. Senator Bell smiled. I believe he knows exactly who he belongs to. Nathan looked at Emma. His expression was soft in a way she had not seen before. He chose you in the pawn shop, he said quietly. I think I've just been catching up. Emma stared at Rocky. The old dog, silver-muzzled and solemn, leaned against her leg with the same calm certainty he had shown on the first day. Nathan handed her a folded paper. Adoption transfer. Official retirement placement. Rocky Cole to Emma Bennett. Emma looked at him. Nathan. He'll still visit, Nathan said. Probably steal my socks. But he knew before I did. He was yours the moment he refused to leave. Emma knelt in front of Rocky, both hands on his face. His amber eyes held hers, steady as sunrise after a long war. Well, she whispered, I hope you like broken people. Rocky licked her cheek. The hall laughed again, but Emma did not care. She wrapped her arms around him, and for the first time in years, the weight in her chest was not shame. It was love. Heavy, warm living. Later, when the crowd thinned and evening light came through the tall windows, Emma stood outside Veterans Hall with Rocky at her side and Nathan beside her. Snow melted along the curb. Cedar Ridge smelled of pine and wet pavement. In the distance, church bells rang 6 times. For years, they had taken her name, her honor, her work, her sleep, her peace. They had tried to make her small enough to disappear. But truth, like spring under frozen ground, had waited. Now Emma Bennett had her name back, her record back, her purpose back, and beside her stood a loyal old dog who had seen through every lie before any human dared to say it aloud. Rocky pressed against her leg. Emma looked toward the mountains and smiled. She was not the woman they buried. She was the one who rose. Sometimes God's miracles do not arrive with thunder from heaven or a light breaking open the sky. Sometimes they come quietly, through a tired nurse who refuses to stop caring, through an old dog who sees the truth before anyone else does, and through one brave decision made when fear says, "Stay silent." Emma lost almost everything before she found the truth. But God had not forgotten her. What people buried, He brought into the light. What was stolen, He restored. And what seemed like an ending became the beginning of healing, justice, and a new purpose. In our own lives, we may not face secret files, powerful enemies, or a loyal K9 named Rocky. But every day, we face moments where we must choose truth over comfort, kindness over indifference, and courage over fear. One honest choice can change a life. One act of love can become someone's miracle. If this story touched your heart, please share where you are watching from in the comments. Tell us which moment moved you the most. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. May God bless you and your family. Protect your home, strengthen your heart, guide your steps, and fill your days with peace, courage, and love. Amen.